Okay. All right. Great, we'll go ahead and call to order the committee of the whole meeting at 5:30 p.m. First up is good of the order. Does anyone have anything? You can also use your council reports during the regular meeting, depending on what you prefer. So I have one quick thing I'm gonna bring up now at the cow, which is we're getting toward the end of the year. And we don't have a lot of meetings left, but those meetings, it's really important that we have a quorum. So we've got meetings scheduled for November 7th, 21st, and then December 5th and 19th. And we do have some time dependent things that would need to get discussed, passed, decision made. So I just need to make sure, is everyone going to be here, or will we at least have a quorum for those dates? Or does anyone see anything on their calendar now that they're going to be out of town?
What were the dates?
November 7th and 21st. I'm not sure, Cynthia, do you know off the top of your head if we have, I don't, the in-between cow probably doesn't matter too much. I'm mostly concerned about the business meeting, like the council meetings.
Yeah, so on the 7th and 21st, we have public hearings scheduled for both of them, which have to be during a regular meeting. We have not planned, as far as I know, anything for the 14th, for the second Tuesday.
So the concern is really just our regularly scheduled council meetings, because we may have things that we need to pass or get through. So if you don't know now, just make sure you really look at those and let our clerk know and us know if you can't make it, to make sure, you know, we do have a quorum for those dates. That's the only thing I have. So anyone else? All right. So review of regular meeting agenda. Were there any consent items on that anyone had any questions that might make you want to pull it, that we could possibly get through it really quick? Yeah, Kelly, coming up.
I just had a really quick question. I don't think we need to put it on, I think it's the Thomas Nolt. If I remember right, it's the one on the corner. As you're coming up Third. I was just curious, there aren't any street trees installed. Is that another one of those projects where we're just gonna wait until the homes are built? That'd be a question for our director, Lasha. Yeah, I'm guessing.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, the membership. Yeah, so really good news for me as I managed by planning.
Oh, okay.
But I know they did their inspection. I understand the time of year they were waiting for, and the site is so tight that it would probably get destroyed pretty easily, so that was bonded.
Okay. Okay.
I remember hearing it on bonded, but again,
Okay.
play comes in, the chips are in, everything is actually in on this, and it's not. It's done that, so.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, anything else? All right, so with that, we'll move on to our first scheduled item, which is the public art policy with our city administrator.
All right, so the documents for review on this, some of them were sent in the September 12th meeting. The rest of the packet information were from the October 3rd meeting, because that's when it was originally scheduled. The Councilmember Natlin sent an email earlier today that has everything close. So at 4:05, there's a link to the new public art policy with edits that we're going to cover tonight, but the attachment that she provided also has a prior art policy. If you would like to take a minute and bring up both, so we can walk through the edits of the public art policy. All right, let me know when you all are ready. Get started. Ready? Okay.
This is the document that Jennifer sent.
The one, so there's a link, but we wanted to just pull up the link, which was in the October 3rd council packet. Let's see, that John, if you go down, proposed public art policy, click here. That's gonna bring up the proposed art policy with the council edits that were sent to me for review. And we'll just kind of follow the same procedure going one day.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so in the overview, the first suggestion is to remove the phrase points of view. So it currently reads, the city intends to integrate a wide range of artworks reflecting diverse artistic disciplines and points of view. So the first requested edit is to remove points of view.
So, here,
I was gonna ask what the basis behind that was.
did you want to speak to your?
Yeah, that was actually a suggestion from a community member, and I think, just when we talked about cultural commission and the purposes of art, it seemed like the primary purpose wasn't points of view, it was, you know, more for the artistic and value and enhancement of the community type of thing. I agree with the person who provided that feedback, that it might be one aspect, and one thing I said in there is later on in the policy, it does talk about, I think I wrote it in my notes. It's already included, that concept is included in 1.1C. And so I just felt like, that just seems like an odd thing to have in like your broad heading, like this is the primary purpose of an art policy is to have art be points of view. And so in 1.1C, it does touch on that. So it can be a component of art. I just don't know that it belongs in the lead primary purpose of art.
Did you want to go, Ron?
Either one, you can go and I can go, or I have
Okay.
feedback on this particular one.
So let's see, I was gonna read, I had kind of gone through and reviewed stuff, and so I'm coming from this, I guess, as like a bit of an artist myself, and so in my mind, every piece of art holds a point of view, to varying levels of subtlety, whether or not, so if we remove this, in my mind, every piece of art does have a point of view, so like you could have 2 or more art pieces representing agriculture in the valley. And you know, you can have one showing the historical and the benefits of it, and you could also have an art piece that kind of shows the destructive nature sometimes of agriculture. So regardless of if we keep points of view in this, to me, every art piece always has a point of view because it's the person who created the art. So I don't care that much if we keep it in or leave it, because to me, that is integral to art. So that's always there regardless of if we spill it out or not. So I just wanted to throw out that prerogative. Go ahead, Councilmember Mercer.
Yeah, so I had a similar take. I mean, every artist is gonna have a point of view and it's gonna be interpreted in a specific way on the point of view. So I didn't have as much, whether it is an or out. I think the one thing that's related to this that I saw missing, and I didn't put a comment, was really around the broader, this is obviously the policy in terms of how we go about doing it. But I think as a council, we had discussed some of the objectives for the art in the community. And that broader theme is not in here that I really saw anywhere. And, you know, whether it's economic growth and sustainability, attachment and cultural identity, artists as contributors, recognize artists in the community, social cohesion and cultural understanding. There's a lot of ways this is described, but you know, the belonging, a lot of the things we talked about. And if that's out, as I said, that particular phrase, I don't think is big to me, but both in sort of national art policy, as well as the art policies of other communities around us, they have a specific overview section that talks about broad goals. And so that's the piece, I think if we took that out, whether it's an addendum or you know, another section as part of the overview, I would like to see something along those lines included. It could also be as part of the directives for the cultural commission coming from the council, but if that's the direction we go, I want to make sure that that's captured as well as in terms of specific things that we endeavor, because I do think the council has a role in terms of articulating what we want the art to accomplish beyond just types of art and media and things of that sort.
Yeah. Other council members? Schaefer, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that reflects the second comment from Jennifer, that, you know, as far as, you know, also having goals of enrichment, education, and enjoyment. I think that's the broad, you know, again, kind of the category of broad goals that would be good to see in here.
Go ahead, Councilmember Lovett.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think that the concern around without having context around points of view, I think you could have like, that could get to be the focus. And if that's the focus, then there's going to always be opposing points of view, and then that can become sticky. So I think if it's more called out, like concepts from the old art policy, artwork enrichment, education, enjoyment, whatever they are, I think it helps to really, you know, state what we're talking about in the overview. I think that would be helpful, because it seems a little vague to say points of view.
Is there anything, Frank?
I kind of like the term artistic expression rather than, points of view.
What other I mean, are you thinking maybe swap out points of view for artistic expression or something like that?
Yeah, maybe define that artistic expression a little more, but yeah, something like that.
What other council members think about that?
Sounds good.
I mean, I still feel like having one of those, having a more broad statement included, integrated into that, like, you know, some of the points that Councilmember Mercer brought up are the one I pulled from our existing art policy, which was my second comment. So just trying to create something a little more broad before we, and some of those concepts you brought on are in the doc where we dive in, when you get down into the purpose, but it does feel like a more broad statement for the overview would be.
Okay,
So if we want to do artistic expression, I think that's great. I agree with that. I just still think that other comment that quite a few
I
people
think
weighed
it
in
was-
on, yeah, still applies.
sorry, go ahead.
So just so I understand so when I make the edits, this is not, it will not be ready for approval tonight, because it has to go through one more round of legal review. So whatever we get through tonight will be redrafted and sent to Daniel for a final, because there's a couple legal fixes that need to happen, or legal tweaks. So this is just getting through like a comment period, but so I included in September the other policies that I had reviewed and relied on. And so the city of Issaquah, for instance, has their overview. It's a bit longer. It's something, and I'm asking if this is kind of what you're looking for. City of Issaquah is committed to supporting high quality public art that adds to the community's vibrancy and identity. When properly integrated, public art enhances the environment, creates a sense of space, expresses a community value, and brings people together to find solutions to a community's infrastructure and social challenges. Specifically, the City of Issaquah's public art program makes public art and artistic expression available to the public, uses public art to express the city's history and culture, educates the community about public art, fosters community pride and sense of place, and acknowledges public art's contribution to cultural tourism and economic development.
That sounds pretty good.
I mean, I won't totally print there.
I can share, I didn't send you this, I have a hard copy, but I did a similar thing. I extracted, they weren't necessarily from city policies, but they are the more, you know, plays an important role in reflecting values of the culture or placemaking, things of that
Yeah,
sort. So I'm happy to send that over an email to the council.
I saw a lot of head nods, it seems like, you know,
Okay, so expand the overview to
a little bit, yeah.
gather more. So the language from the 2015 policy was, the city shall seek to acquire and display public artwork for the enrichment, education, and enjoyment of its citizens, and to enhance commercial, residential, and public areas throughout the city. So it's pretty short. So maybe something a little more expansive, like the way the city of Issaquah did.
Yeah, sounds like it. I see that now, so.
Okay. Alright. The next comment is under 1.1A, adding the word accessible. So establishing a diverse and accessible collection of public artworks.
That was an email I received, that comment.
I saw a few head nods.
Yeah.
Does anyone not like that addition?
Well, what's non-accessible artwork? That's something that's.
Kim can be, oh,
Yeah.
go ahead, Councilman
What
Lovett.
is that?
I would just say, I actually like that addition a lot, because like, if you think about, first of all, access to, like, the spaces you mentioned before, access to the spaces needs to be considered, right? So that's an accessibility thing. And then also, you know, points of view in terms of people from the hard of hearing community, different things like that, incorporating some possibilities in that way, I think is cool. At least it should be reflected in this document that we're thinking in that way. I think that's.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna add that, you know, there's also color contrast or, you know, vision, things like that. So there's other kinds of accessibility, not always having, you know, and not always referring to like ramps or anything like that. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I mean, with QR codes and some of the more interactive ways that you can display art, you can be more accessible to those who are hearing impaired by incorporating sound. I mean, there's lots of ways to increase accessibility to art. So,
In general,
yes,
like head
on
nods,
that.
not
Yes.
legit.
Okay. Next in 1.3, Councilmember Naplin, add consideration of environmental sustainability is appropriate, which was a suggestion based on community input. So right now we have for criteria for selection, aesthetic quality and artistic merit, placement and siting, fabrication, handling, installation, maintenance requirements, liability and safety, adding where, as appropriate, environmental sustainability as another, consideration for selection.
I was wondering, do you think that, does it need to be its own category or would it fit into anything? Like, would it fit into the placement sitting?
How about the
Sitting
maintenance requirement?
Yeah, even
or
maintenance,
maintenance?
yeah.
I just wasn't sure if it needs its own little thing or if we could, if it kind of made sense to add it somewhere in there already.
Yeah, we could edit 1.3.4 maintenance requirements and environmental sustainability and then drop a sentence that says, you know, artwork is, you know, uses materials that are sustainable, something like that.
And I think there are a couple, you know, I think it ultimately comes down to how many bullet points you could come up, because I think on that one category, it could be, as you said, there could be a maintenance component, there could be the reuse of materials, which you've seen a lot of public art where they're reusing or repurposing artwork. I think the example that you gave in terms of you know, just a reflection of an environmental theme. I mean, there are a lot of different ways. So, I mean, it might be, I would say, whether or not it can stand on its own is like how many points of guidance we want to provide in terms of the policy. If it's just the high level, just another box we want to check, I think you can go with that. If we want to actually be more directive in terms of see that type of work, it might make sense to break it out into its own category.
That's a good point. Other good, Councilman Lovett?
Yeah, I think if you get too refined on that, you may actually not be able to accept certain things. You know, I mean, if you got too granular on what.
Oh, yeah, a lot of these were like examples. I didn't think you had to check all of them.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
just, I mean, I don't know if this is the language, but as appropriate is actually.
As appropriate, yes.
Nice way of framing that, just because you never know, you know, everything medium wise is gonna be different.
Their thoughts? Do we think that it needs its own category with bullet points, or do you think just squeeze it in with one of the? I think our city administrator already mentioned maybe with the maintenance clump there.
Yeah, I can do it either way. So
Yeah.
if we want to have environmental sustainability as kind of a core value and call out, I'm sure I can come up with 4 or 5 things, or we can incorporate it here and I can add maintenance requirements and environmental sustainability. Right now there's A through D, but I can add like an E and F that talks about using recyclable materials, and because the selection criteria as written does not require that every piece meet not only every selection criteria, but every subpart under there. It's like
Things to consider.
things to consider.
Yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense.
any strong thoughts one way or the other? Not doing anything, so I don't know, maybe that is your discretion. Just add it in there somewhere.
Okay, so then the next is in 1.6, the biennial public art plan. Adding a note that the biannual public art plan will be recommended to council for approval. So as it's currently written, consistent with the city of Duvall's biennial budgeting process, they'll shall produce a biennial public art plan. So the reason I wrote it that way is you don't want them to be on off years. You want the biennial art plan to be part of the budgeting process, otherwise you're gonna get into funding dynamics that are off kilter.
Quick technical question, I guess, that might help others. Would something like this, would it be approved within the budget ordinance or would it be separate?
We would approve it within the budget, so
Okay.
you would have a plan developed. I mean, the way as Rita and I, once a cultural commission gets, convened and they start putting together their art plans, we would help set their cadence. And I think it probably would make sense for them to have their biannual art plan done June, July-ish. Because then we would, the budget has a section for cultural commission and a, bars code for cultural commission. So all of their proposals for the budget would fit under the cultural commission, which would be into the preliminary budget that we would propose to council.
Go ahead, Councilmember Apple.
Yeah, the one thing I'd add is, the implementation or the, how it might play out would be, and paid for would be in the budget, but often documents that lead up to the budget, like a capital facilities plan, we do adopt that ahead of time, but then those get integrated into our budgeting. And so as an advisory commission, it does seem like having this group, not just while we're in the heat of the budget, have this group ahead of time, say, here's our ideas for the biennium for art. And then we could at that point weigh in and approve, a plan that would then get integrated into the budget. Because otherwise we're gonna be discussing intricacies of what we're doing for art in the heat of the budget, which I think a lot of times we've been trying to get away from that, to try to have these conversations ahead of time. So if we could have that in the summer ahead of time to review, if that makes sense.
So there's the difference between what you want in policy versus what you want as a procedure. And so they have to create bylaws still and their own kind of rules of engagement, and can't think of the right word, which is a little different than what's in the policy. So you wouldn't necessarily put a timeline with strict deadlines in the art policy about how they do their business. That's more of what will be in their bylaws and plans. Different though, if you want in the policy that you have to pre-approve their plan before they involve themselves in the budget, but I wouldn't necessarily put like deadlines in it because you're getting a little too granular.
That's fine.
The other council members think of that. It sounds like it's the distinction between, because we would be essentially approving it through the budget process, but I get what you're asking, so I think, is it possibly adding a line here saying, just simply it would be brought forth as a recommendation prior to the budgeting process, or are you comfortable with it worded as is, as long as that's the understanding with the back end procedure? Or I just wasn't sure if there was a specific recommendation for
I mean,
the-
a lot of plans are, eventually adopted by council. I mean, we have a comp plan and we have, transportation plan, and if art is something we're investing money on, typically a plan of how we're gonna spend our money and invest our priorities and staff time would come to council for adoption.
Oh, yeah, no,
before it was
yeah.
integrated, so I guess I would say, as we do with other plans, it go through a process in the commission and the community, and then it would come for formal adoption.
Yeah, I get that, and I agree. I'm asking, are you saying you want to add verbiage here to explain that?
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
what I'm
there's, in
saying.
the old policy, I think it did make specification of saying, brought to council for adoption or for approval or things like that. There were quite a few statements in the existing art policy that talked about,
But I think the other piece that you were sort of getting at a little, Amy, is whether, they're gonna come with a recommendation, we'll assess how much it's cost, and we're gonna sort of bake that into the budget, or we'll allocate a fund for public art as part of the budget that will then be utilized by because that's the other piece of it in terms of whether it's front-loaded or rear-loaded. At the end of the day, we still have to adopt the plan regardless. But, and I think maybe that gets more into the process piece that Cynthia referred to in terms of how we define that cadence and then what the actual process of approving art, whether it's more thematic, whether it's broad categories, whether it's specific allocation over a year. I mean, I think the plan could vary quite a bit in terms of what the Cultural Commission recommends. And so, I don't have a specific point of view because I think it could work either way. We just, ultimately, there's going to be a pot of funds and a scope and things that we're working through.
Yeah.
There's a second, under this section, a second suggestion that add a section that the plan should include collaboration with council goals and the public, which if you front load it, you would then have that opportunity. So you wouldn't have to add a separate section on include collaboration with council goals and the public, because if you have the plan pre-approved, it would have that collaboration with council. So we could amend consistent with the city of Duvall's biennial budget process. The Duvall Cultural Commission shall produce a public art plan. I guess, prior to the budget process or within, the first 3 quarters of the year.
And it might be a draft, plan versus the final plan, because they'll get feedback from potentially from the council.
We'll go Councilmember Lovett and then Shaver.
This is just a question. Doesn't it affect what as we walk into the budget, doesn't it affect kind of what we're earmarking based on the ideas inside the said plan? So like, isn't it better to have like the ambition up front and then walk into the budget with the understanding that that ambition will take versus a reactive stance?
Yeah.
So to me, it just logically, it's
All right, I'll figure out how to put in that you should get the biennial art plan approved through council prior to the budget.
Councilmember Shaver, did you want to add anything?
Well, I was kind of homing in on the same bullet that Cynthia just pointed out. I do like that bullet. In fact, I'd like to actually break it out into 2 bullets, because that collaboration with the public is important enough in itself that it shouldn't be, overshadowed with collaboration with the council. So, to me, it would make sense to have something that says, plan should include collaboration with council, and then another plan should include collaboration with public. I'm afraid that they're both in the same bullet item, the last part, the public collaboration, is a little bit overshadowed.
Well, the council goals will be presumed through approval and having to have it adopted by council. I mean, I would presume you wouldn't approve a public art policy that didn't meet your goals.
Yeah, and it could, instead of collaboration, we could use the word approved by council. I'd be okay with that too.
Right. We could add another bullet, so it says the plan which shall include the goals, anticipated site selection. We can drop in a public participation process as part of what they have to produce.
That'd be great.
Yeah, Councilmember Shaver.
Yeah, and this is kind of where we have things in different places, because there is the whole section 1.5 on community input, which sort of presumes it doesn't, I mean, it is articulated, there's sort of 2 ways you can read it. On one side is an important element, it's not doesn't specify that it's required, but it's kind of, assumed. And then it actually lists the specific public meetings, neighborhood meetings, review plans, public art plans, meetings. My point was, I don't know that it was actually necessary to specifically reference it down below, because we have a whole section on gathering community input, whereas the council has a fiduciary role in terms of approving the budget item, which is a little different, but yeah, I'm not opposed to replicating, but I know we're trying to be kind of streamlined, get what we need to be in there, but not duplicate where we don't need to.
Yeah, and part of that is based on advice from counsel, where litigation in this area has gotten a little fraught is when you have these extremely overbroad and lengthy art policies that are subject to interpretation, and there's a lot of ways to get crosshairs. You open yourself up to more litigation, so we are trying to have a streamlined, good guidance document, which is a roadmap, but without creating, like, one of the documents, or one of the cities I looked at was the city of Raleigh, which is, you know, very different city than Duvall. I mean, they have like a 57-page, manual on how to do this. That is not the advice that I was given when we thought about revising and refreshing an art policy. It was, you know, streamlined, consistent with the case law that's come out since 2020. And with enough direction from the city that it's provides a good guidepost, but without so much specific direction that you're basically kind of telling the cultural commission what they will do without the deliberative process.
Yeah. Did you get enough feedback on this point?
I think so.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, before you go on to
Oh,
the
yeah,
next
go ahead.
one, on the next section, open invitational, open entry, 171. A comment on that.
There's one before that, which is add a new 1.7 section on public art database.
Oh, I see, okay.
Is there an interest in having the cultural commission create a public art database?
That should be staffing. That should be staff.
Councilmember Napoli, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that was also a suggestion from a community member, just that it would be nice to have a database that, and yeah, you're right, maybe is it not part of this, although it could easily be called out in here that there would be one maintained. The issue is that I don't know that we 100% know how much art we own and what the requirements are. Certain artwork has had agreements associated with who owns it, what happens if it gets decommissioned, things like that. And so I thought it was a good suggestion, whether it belongs here or not.
I totally agree, we should
Yeah.
have an art database. I don't think it's the cultural commission thing, and this is like personal experience with having volunteers work on a database for an art installation of the job I had in past life. And it ultimately was kind of a mess, and having the staff that actually worked there, it was a little more streamlined because they were there consistently. But I realized that's like a whole other work plan. I think it's great, and I think that ties in really strongly to economic development. But I think if we were to consider, is that something the cultural commission could do? I wouldn't want to do it like right off the bat. I would want to let them get going with everything, like as kind of is in here, and then in time, oh, is that something that they could add to their plate? Let's go Councilmember Mercer really quick and then back to you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, in my point of view, that's sort of an element of conservation, and I would actually include it under the city department section is just a role. And again, it wouldn't necessarily need to be implemented, but part of that is the accessioning process. It's also, you need to have that for maintenance, you need to have it for, so it fits into that bucket, but again, I think there's places that it could be put that wouldn't necessarily put a burden on that.
Did you want to speak to it?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I don't see this public art policy as what the cultural commission does. Public art policy covers all things. Cultural commission interacts with our public art policy, but the public art policy isn't all cultural commission. Does that make sense? So having something that says we will have a public art database doesn't mean that we're expecting the cultural commission to have anything to do with it. It just means our public art policy is our policy about public art. And one of our policies related to public art is that we should track what we have. And so I don't consider it as, if it's in here, we're assigning the work to cultural commission. It just means as part of our policy about public art, we track it.
Go ahead, Councilmember Schaefer.
Maybe we should include this as a future item. I agree, it's probably too much for the cultural commission to bite off, at least immediately. And it may actually be more appropriate for staff to do this. I think it's maybe too early to decide that. But we could put some words in here about what this database, what the goals of this database would be. Things like, ownership, maintenance, agreements, whatever makes sense. And, put it down as a, responsibility to be determined, maybe staff, maybe cultural commission, we don't. But it's a good place to have.
It kind of doesn't put any TBDs in their policy at this point. I think Ron had a good idea. It's basically a departmental issue, not a cultural commission.
I mean, you could just add one word to city Duvall is responsible for the appropriate permitting, maintenance, conservation, and tracking of public art or something of that sort. I mean,
Oh, that one.
and then just leave it, open for staff to determine how they want to do
Where was that you just
it. It
mentioned?
was under T.Bird.
Oh, yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. I think that would, because I think that's a great long-term goal, and I don't know when that's gonna fit into a work plan, but like, we should be doing that at some point, but that's a great spot to add it, I think.
Okay. I noted it. Okay, so then the next comments are to 1.7.
Yes. Yeah, under 1.71, it says no fees will be charged to artists submitting materials and applications. I kind of have a few hesitant to include that in there because I think you may be subjected to a lot of nuisance art requests, If you put in a fee of $25, $50, $7,500, you're only going to get serious submittals, I'm kind of just bringing this up in light of what's gone on in the past year.
We could take that out and like all of our policies, this is a living, breathing document. And so if we get to a place where we either see an overabundance of art or, we're not seeing much and we want to add it back in. So we could take it out to give ourselves a little more flexibility.
Yeah, well, most art shows are, do that in 2 feet.
Yeah.
If you're serious.
What other thoughts on the fee?
And this might be when we're Daniel, sorry, I didn't, I just thought, this, I can also flag this for Daniel, I don't know if this is a, because it's a city policy where we are expressing this city's interest in art, if this has some legal component to it that needs to be reviewed.
Councilmember Napoli?
Yeah, I'm just curious. So this isn't about whether you have a fee or not to be part of an art show. It's whether there's a fee to have your art considered or your design considered for possible, if there was a call for artists for an installation. Are you talking about just even, it's typical in the art world that if you are applying.
If you are submitting a piece of art for a show, generally there's a fee attached to that for, to cover the cost of evaluating it and, the people that are looking at it and judging whether that should be included or not included. Now we have a cultural commission that's volunteers, but still, I was thinking a marginal fee would keep this non-serious people out of submitting frivolous art. That's all I'm worried about is getting a barrage of nonsensical art.
I think it's a good point. We should keep it on our radar. I don't care if we keep this in or not. You were mentioning checking with Daniel to see if, how do we maintain flexibility there, but regardless of if we keep it in there or not, I would like to not be charging a fee until it becomes a problem for a call for artists. And if it becomes kind of like similar to with the, what was it, years ago, the electronic records requests, they started charging like a nominal fee for things because there were starting to be some really big voluminous requests. So for me personally, I don't care if we keep it in or not, but my preference is when there's a call for artists that it is free unless it becomes a problem. And then we could look at it again, but, cause then I would wanna look at how do you have some kind of like scholarship available so that, you know, somebody who really couldn't afford the $10, you know what I mean, or whatever it would be. And I know it's kind of laughable, but, you know, it's a reality for a lot of people and a lot of artists especially, so. Councilmember Levitt and then Mercer.
I wonder if you don't accomplish the same thing that you're suggesting by, and I'm not suggesting this should be written into the language here, I just don't know if it's something that happens on the back end where the criteria by which you have to apply is complex enough that you'd have to be a serious artist to have to present it in such a fashion. You know, if someone's just gonna make a PDF of something egregious, it takes 4 seconds, but if you're asking them to just, you know, actually put together a proper pitch deck or a proper, like, you know, project and scope of work for the entire thing, I mean, however detailed we want to get, that would certainly do the same thing without the hamstringing nature of financial obligation, just a thought, but I don't know how you write that into the policy, but just that like that could be something that is considered by the cultural commission as part of the submission process.
Yeah.
Councilmember Mercer.
Yeah, and essentially that's more or less what I was gonna say. I mean, I think that the scope of work, much like a bid, like you don't get a lot of frivolous bids. You get people, there's time and cost that goes into that. If we're asking for maquettes or scale models or such and such, I mean, there's an investment to do that. And I think you can limit those. I mean, we actually even call out some of the criteria at the top, you know, professional or portfolio or whatever, however we fit. I think that can be done as part of the process that we're not capturing in the policy. And then, as you said, if it does become an issue, then obviously we can revisit it. But my experience is there's a lot of work committed, those types of things, and they're not gonna, they get a lot of, they get a scope through.
Yeah. Yeah. Councilmember Schaefer.
Yeah, considering, you know, some of the artists may be submitting, proposals, including, you know, kids, you know, high school kids or whoever. I like the no fee policy, and I'd say, let's leave it in there until it's a problem, and then the problem, we can change it.
So is the majority feel leave it like it's stated right now, or remove it, or have our city administrator check with Daniel and do something that allows flexibility? I heard Rick's opinion. I'm fine either way, I think, but other council members have a strong feel in it. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think if you defer removing it to the point where, after the fact that you've had all these submissions, then people are gonna say, well, you're only changing the rules to prevent me from submitting artwork. You know? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah. I guess I don't wanna get caught up in too many hypotheticals with it, because I mean, it could happen, but I don't know. Good.
This is just to address what Councilmember Levitt had mentioned. One of the next suggestions just talks about the process of calling for the artist and the selection process. And I think it touches on what Councilmember Levitt was saying, that if you have a really clear process, and our old art policy, existing art policy does have that, it talks about what the call of artists would be. You'd want, you know, you'd give out ahead of time the selection criteria, the budget, the location, this and that, and then what you would expect from the artist would be a letter of interest, a resume, up to 12 print or digital images of a certain quality. You know what I mean? Like there would be a level of sophistication that would be required so that, you know, you just aren't going to get frivolous submissions. So that was one of my comments next, was just to integrate more of a structure so that you don't get into kind of like, well, this time you didn't require that and now you're requiring it and that's not fair. Or I don't know if that would address sort of what you're talking about, just a more professional process. This is our expectation if you're submitting something.
But just so that, you know, we need to actually go through and check if we, because I know you were saying that it's possible, oh, can we even charge a fee? Is that what you were asking, or what the legality of it was?
Yeah, I highlighted it for legal review, but I mean, I guess I would say either way, if
Yeah.
we leave it in and it becomes a problem, we can certainly document that it became a problem. But I'll have that section reviewed.
Yeah, but I guess I was just wondering, I heard Rick said prefers no fees, I prefer no fees. Mike prefers a fee of some kind. Where is everyone else at for now? I just wanted to know. No fees.
I prefer no fee unless it becomes a problem.
Okay, and you?
Yeah, no fee.
Okay, so just if that helps with talking to Daniel.
Yes, okay, so then the next suggestion is from Councilmember Naplin. So back in the 2015 policy, there is a section for call for artists, artist selection, the art selection, and then to also add the donation policy from the prior policy from 2015. It will, if this is adopted, it has to create some cleanup because we don't have a design review committee or some of the things that were back in here.
What section again?
So there's the comment for the public in 1.7, the public art project selection methods. Right now it has kind of the selection methods, and it keeps it pretty simple. Councilmember Naplin is suggesting to go back to the 2015 and put in the sections for call for artists, artist selection, art selection, and the donation policy from the 2015 policy.
It's in the email as an attachment. If you open that, that's where you can see what those sections are.
Councilmember Mercer and then the mayor.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm fine with that. I read through them. I think, you know, we would require another review just to make sure that it's the right selection criteria, because I think that's the only piece is, you know, but I don't have a problem looking through some of the other city examples that you provided. Cynthia, there's included a section, and I think where it's not included, then you need to have some appendix or adjunct, because there's going to be a policy document or a process document that would define this thing. The only one I kind of had issue with from the list was, my understanding from Daniel was, you know, part of the change was that we couldn't accept donated art specifically because that opened us up to all donated art. We can't pick and choose. So I wouldn't expect that section to be in there based on.
And I intentionally did because of the recent case law.
I would say, I would recommend not putting in the call for artists in the other section, because I think that's something that is really better suited to be updated by administration and provided to the committee, to the cultural commission, based on what our current policies are elsewhere, because you end up, one of the challenges long-term, especially in small cities, is when you have multiple policies with different different donation policies or call for artists or whatever else, and it gets really confusing on where to find that. I think that's something that really should be, and you may have a situation where you have a very specific narrow focus that you want to get out of it, and having that as part of the policy could be restrictive to achieving these goals. So, I mean, it's not a big deal. It's just like, don't recommend it.
Yeah, there are a couple things. So under the call for artists, you know, it lists, so the 2015 policy is structured with different components than what the current commission has. So it has, you know, a art selection panel and a design review panel, none of which we plan to have now. So it would have to be cleaned up a little bit. But certainly, you know, the call for artists has description of the project, the location, the budget. Some of these may or may not be appropriate for a particular art or art concept. So each call for artist shall include at a minimum the following information: the project location, the schedule. I mean, some things are gonna have that. Description of the selection process, the selection criteria, which we already have somewhere else. So we can take parts of these, but given that the 2015 work for the city with art, which is structured much different, it's not a lift. It can't be lifted and dropped in.
Just really quick, other council members? Okay, good, Councilor.
Yeah, so this was also something that was suggested to me by, it was actually a discussion with Cass, and who had been part of the cultural commission and done a lot of art with the community. And, part of it seemed like when you would do a large project such as Main Street and there's art components in it, or let's say you did a city hall. Often you wouldn't then just have your cultural commission do that. You would create a group who would, you know, it might include business owners. If it was Main Street, for example, that would be an example given to me that when Main Street was done, you know, you had business owners, you had, you know, a broad group of people who, you know, worked on the selection process for Main Street. Apparently, I wasn't there at the time, I didn't participate, but that was my understanding, is that, depending on the project and the scope of it, you might have different stakeholders who are not currently in the cultural commission that you would want to involve in the selection process. And so that's why this had more of a broad, you know, if you had some large art project or a project that had art components, that you would form a selection committee of stakeholders.
Yeah,
So you already have in another part on the biennial art plan that with the suggested edits that they include a description of how they are including the public. And for a large scale group, you could, as part of the adoption process, say, no, that project is really big. We want you to have a design review committee or an art panel. So you have a process for doing that in their biennial art plan. As I'm looking at this, I'll just tell you my immediate reaction. This seems like it creates the call for artists, some of the artist selection, it creates barriers to entry because it is so specific. And that would be my concern.
other council members? Let's go ahead.
So sort of one just follow-up question, and I sort of agree with what the mayor said. I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be in here, but obviously for any project that's put out into the public, there's going to be a set of criteria. And I think the key where you were trying to, there should be a standardized process or something that we follow. So maybe that is part of the bylaws or the procedures that the Cultural Commission is working from. The one question I had sort of about this, and it sort of touches on this a little bit in terms of the selection piece, and it's something else we talked about with Daniel, is the one item I don't see in here specifically called out is when we were talking about public speech versus government speech. There could come an instance where the city wants to communicate a certain point, and so they're going to use government speech. My question is, would that fall under the limited invitational, and is it something specifically that's commissioned or purchased, or does that need to be articulated, broken out? Because that was the one that might not go through the Cultural Commission. It may not go out, you know, as a broad, it might be a specific thing, and I'm kind of asking this and feeling more hypothetical, if that was discussed and if that sort of falls under one of these three buckets, or if that's intentionally left out, which is also okay, but I know that's been part and parcel of some of these broader conversations is I want to make sure that the city or the council can communicate within or outside, depending on the need of any policy they put forward, and that might impact that selection criteria. That might be a little different.
So, both.
Okay.
So we kept this section pretty open to reflect that we didn't want to create a ton of rules that would prevent the city from doing a direct purchase, which is why you see 1.73. To Councilmember Nathan's point, this is not just instructions to the Cultural Commission, it's how we might buy a piece of work. It's how, so under 1.72, that's in there to kind of conceive that outside of the Cultural Commission, the mayor or the council might decide that they want to convene their own artwork that is outside the scope of the Cultural Commission. And the language here would allow any of those.
Okay. And the reason I asked that question is then back to your original question, maybe, is I would then on that basis not include the specific section around selection, because that would become more prescriptive to some of those other things that we might want to do outside of the commission. I think by putting it in there as a dedicated section, you start to tie your hands into that. Do that, but it's obviously going to be part and parcel of any invitations we put out, you know, open invitations, limited invitations, they're gonna have a scope of work that's gonna encompass budget, type of art, geographical location, placement of the art that will be captured in this thing.
Yeah, and 1.7, 1.7.1, the project is advertised and project guidelines are published, so it's, you're gonna have the project guidelines published in the open invitation, what you wanna see.
Yeah, I don't personally have a problem beefing the section up a little bit, but I agree, it's not just a lift and drop from the old policy. But I wanna be careful, excuse me, about doing that, because like what Councilmember Mercer just said, where do you stop? Then if any changes if we wanna make changes to a process, then you have to remember to come back here and change it if it said it in a certain way. So like, you know, if we were to add anything, language like may include, you know, things such as, you know, that kind of thing, but I don't know, I on some levels, some of the other sections, like I said, are a little beefier than this one, and so I can see that, but I do think it was, like you said, sparse by design, because, you know, you wanna leave flexibility in there, so I'm a little torn on it. I feel like it's okay as it is, but if we were to add anything, it would just be kind of cherry picking a few things and wording it in a way that doesn't make it like this is the process and we always ask for these things, because then I just think this is gonna jump in size. Other council members, I love it.
I will read with you, one, I do think it like, you basically create a lot of jobs inside of some of those steps, so that's one thing, but I do think, having said that, the call to artist section, section 8 in the old one, like granted, some of it's not maybe applicable, but some of it is good, particularly, you know, depending on the method of selection, call to artist should be published in local, regional newspapers, art websites, online sites, direct mail, or all of the above. What I feel like we're missing in this thing, in this is it says here, the process is open to all qualified artists with possible limitations based on geographical or other eligibility criteria. That's really vague. And so like that kind of reads like well, basically at our choice. So I'm wondering if it doesn't help to, again, like you're saying, not maybe too much, but at least say like, this is the process, like a call to artist will go out, this is what will happen, and then we'll make our decisions. But at least the clarity I like in that old piece is that there is a very transparent process on how we're saying the job is here. And now everybody had an opportunity to submit for this job. And I do like that, the accessibility in that 8 is I think important, and it doesn't exist in.
If others are interested in that, I would, the one sentence about the project is advertised and project guidelines are published, adding a little to that, maybe, you know, similar to in other policies where we say specifically, you know, here's how it's done, or give kind of an idea of what to expect, you know, that it would be broadly published somehow, or I don't know, I think I saw a hand, did I?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
I don't have any objection.
Yeah, I mean, we're just talking about the procurement policy, and it's very clear, if government's gonna be spending money on things, you don't want it to look like you were just, you know, arbitrarily giving it to a certain person. Do you know what I mean? And so you have RFPs, you have RFQs, you know, there is a process where you have selection criteria and you say up front. And so I think it just goes in line with more how we do procurement in general as a city, to have some kind of process and criteria expected. I just want to check in with Councilmember Schaefer and Supple. Did you have any thoughts on this part, piece?
Well, I like what Corey said, you know, putting it in public notices and newspapers and stuff like that. That would be a good idea.
I like the idea of keeping it general as possible. I realize that can lead to issues, so I don't have a strong feeling either way. I'm okay, whatever the rest of the council wants to do.
It does, I did hear a consensus on the piece about adding a little more about like, what do you mean by published, and, you know, maybe adding a little bit to that sentence somehow.
Yeah, so for the opening paragraph, which we can put, actually, we can change open invitational and maybe take out a little language, but the opening section under the old policy is for opening and limited competition, the call for artists will be issued by, we would have to change it by the city and or cultural commission. Depending on method of selection, calls for artists shall be published in local regional newspapers, etc., so that at least the advertisement of the job is very, very transparent. And it says, depending on method of selection, we can also add to that opening paragraph, and the selection criteria will be included in that advertisement. Would that work?
I like that. Yeah, that sounds good.
That's great.
Okay. Advertisement, and then, from those sections, is that, so knowing we can't add donation, there's still artist selection and art selection that, to some degree, we already have the selection criteria in the front. Is there an interest in?
I have a really quick question. Just legally on the limited invitational, is that allowed that we could decide to spend a certain amount of money and not publish it widely or make it available and just choose someone? Is that something that is, yeah, completely legal? So it's not, because like when we do public works, for example, depending on the dollar amount, we have to go on the roster of people to make sure everyone has a chance. So there's no problem just choosing an artist within the cultural commission and just saying, we're gonna give you this work.
No, so it's very similar to the government speech. So later tonight, we'll be discussing the welcoming signs that we put together as something that we might want to add to the city, as you are welcome here. We can decide to do that. We don't have to commission a bunch of artists. We can go to a print shop, print those signs, we put them on City Hall, on Visitor Center. So there is an opportunity for the mayor or for council to speak without going through a large purchasing process, depending on what it is.
This is about specifically choosing an artist to give money to do something, not just us printing something.
It would be the same way, if we, chose, which we do all the time, we choose Sandy Duvall to print stuff for Light of Duvall. She's an artist, she prints stuff for us, we have done that in the past.
And I would say too, under a specific spending threshold, if there's art budgeted in the budget, the city has the authority to make that purchase, just like going out and buying reams of paper and pencils. Following the food policy for events, they don't come to council to get approval for stuff that's approved in the budget, a small dollar amount.
I mean, the purchasing policy does say if you go over $7,500.
Yes,
I
I understand
guess,
that,
so
so
there
that's
are
the thing.
limitations.
We have a purchasing policy, so
Okay.
I would not expect this administration to come forward with anything over $7,500 in that purchasing policy without council approval.
Okay.
That just doesn't make sense. If we were to purchase a piece of art that large, that would, to me, well, even if it doesn't fit the niche of the purchasing policy, would just be something that would just be done. It's pretty basic.
Do we have anything else on this?
Director Lynch.
So just a couple thoughts too. So depending on the threshold, right, could be assigned to staff, the commission, in my opinion, and understanding, isn't going to issue contracts. The staff and what those contracts are big within the conflict, right? So those financial thresholds are going to match the same. So again, the commission's not giving a contract, they're selecting an artist within the city to get the contract. We did it for Main Street, they were fairly large in totality, but they were small relative to each person. So each person, like when we did our boards, was 4,000 per board. So if you did 3 boards, you were 12 grand. That's not a council threshold, but the pot of money is a council threshold. And those contracts fall into the mayor's office for signature. So those types of management elements are of course in place. And I would also argue too, it might be a good question for Daniel, like selecting an artist. Cost-wise, sure, you're gonna sign a contract, but I could argue that more as A&E style intellectual property, where it's not straight up like. Mr. Schaefer's gonna submit, and Mr. Love's gonna submit, and his is $8, and his is $300. You may pick the $300, but you're not bound by cost when it's an intellectual style of thing you're buying. So that might be just another point of clarification to your mind.
Well, and we do this too, when we select summer stage musicians. we don't go out and have all of them come and perform for us and figure out which ones we like best. You know, we hire the 6 musicians that we think will draw the most, you know, foot traffic into Duvall.
I would enjoy that process though, just. Are we good to move on to section 2? I'm keeping an eye on the time. I was kind of hoping we could get through this in this meeting. So was there anything else on the 1 section, or are we good to move on to 2?
Okay, all right, so under 2.1, Councilmember Naplin, incorporate from the 2015 existing art policy, the language on, this refers to city council. Public of a long-term permanent nature shall be approved by an art selection panel, and the council. The panel shall review, process, artist submittals, make a recommendation for council. So, you know, first, we won't have an art selection panel as a convened part of the cultural commission. Projects, though, as part of the biennial art plan, may have an art selection panel as part of the deliberative process that council goes through. The process design shall be sent to the staff design review committee, which we won't have, again, as a standing thing. It might be for individual projects. So question, do we want to add this here?
Yeah, I just want to say, I'm not saying we need all of these things added. I was just saying that is something that was a theme throughout the other one, that the cultural commission on its own is a advisory commission, and that commission isn't on their own deciding how we spend all the money, like it's, you know, bringing things forward. And so that was kind of the theme that I noticed in the old one, and so I wasn't sure if that was still the expectation within this one, because it really just talks about the role of city council is that we're just approving the public art plan, and that we don't necessarily have a role potentially in any other way. Because I mean, this is trying to describe the role of city council, and it appears that our only role when it relates to public art is we approve a plan, and then the commission and just goes off and does their stuff. We don't have any other. And so that's why I was giving examples of it's pretty clear in the original policy, and just an advisory commission in general. Their role isn't to make all the decisions, it's to recommend to council.
So a quick question, maybe, when the cedar planks go up, what was so the past policy was all the designs, I'm just not remembering them coming to us for approval, but I'm trying to remember, like, had that been done
Way
before?
predates me, and Steve stepped out. Predates Beth and John too.
Yeah.
I think there's dollar thresholds too.
So when you look at, so we already have the biennial art plan, and then you look at 2.2. You see references to municipal code, but also that they have bylaws that are adopted by council and govern the work of the cultural commission. So those are already 2 touch points where council is more or less approving and directing how the cultural commission will do its work. I realize in the past, the cultural commission operated differently to the point of having like their own website that was like adjacent and off to our website, but that's not the way we're envisioning the cultural commission working.
And I would also add that one of the problems that came out of the previous policies with cultural commission is that they were not communicating with city staff. They were not staffed. They were doing things essentially on their own. And that is not a good way for a city commission to operate. So in addition to the website, there were other things, and I believe some members even wrote some of the contracts, and that's completely not appropriate for any board or commission. That should always be an official staff duty, which is another reason why we're making these changes.
Councilmember Mercer.
And that's the only, other thing, Jennifer sort of was more expansive in her comments, but that was the only other red flag I had a little bit, is because, from my time on the planning commission, that was an advisory body, as you said, we made assessments against the code, we then made recommendations, the council was free to accept or override those recommendations. But the word approved is throughout in terms of, and as I read it, is they're making final approval, like there is still, as you said, the check mark in terms of the budget and the contract, but it doesn't say anywhere recommend. So that was, for me, and again, I wasn't 100% clear in terms of what the intent was, but I would defer to that commission, but I also, if there's something that the council feels is totally inappropriate or sends the wrong message, I mean, I would also like to think that we have the opportunity to ask them to go back and I don't read that in here. It talks about approving, so that was, that was the main concern I had. And again, I jotted down some notes, but I didn't go back on the third. So it wasn't necessarily adding all of these, but that was the only piece I wanted to validate with the broader council and the city administrator and mayor in terms of the intent behind it, because that was didn't 100% align with where I thought we were going.
Yeah, I'll jump in and then I'll see if other council members want to give their opinions, and I keep watching the time dwindle down, so, I think, yeah, I agree, that last sentence in 2.1 where it's like expected that the DCC will provide a report of their work meetings and plans twice annually to city council. I guess my question is, so for each project, are they not going to, they're not gonna make a recommendation like, here was our process we went through and here's our recommendation. And for the most part, I didn't anticipate council would be like, that looks great, we're good to go, but is that not the intention to have council approve, kind of rubber stamp the final selection when on each project piece that gets done?
Well, again, I go back to, you have to approve their biennial art plan. And for each different project, your level of interest and involvement can be dictated in that plan. So if you have something where you want them to come back and, or involve council earlier, you want the ultimate design approval, you could write that in. The cultural commission does more though than just pick a piece of art that may or may not represent something or is prominent. I mean, there's also, I took it off of their project list and gave it to our communications coordinator because they already had so much, but like naming a snowplow. Do you want to be on the final decision for naming the snowplow, choosing the summer stage bands? And there's a lot that you could vest with them that you have in the past. The cultural commission has chosen the summer stage bands. I mean, the mayor, myself, city council haven't gotten involved at that granular level of detail. There might be other projects though, where you want final approval, or you want a very intensive public participation process. I think it'll depend on the project.
Yeah. So just to follow up on my own question, it sounds like the art plans, because of course the call for artists and all those things would not have happened by that time, but before approving that art plan, council would weigh in, and for each kind of thing proposed in their plan, we would say, here's the level we want for this one, here's the level. There wouldn't, as opposed to just being like, we always kind of want some sort of check-in on everything. I mean, what do council members feel on that? Do you like the idea of weighing in on council member stuff?
So where is that written into what policy that you just described?
Well, yeah, I was just paraphrasing what I was trying to restate what I believe I heard.
Yeah, but I don't know where in.
Would it be in 1.6, the biennial public art plan? But I think it's kind of inherent, right, that, the council approves the plan, so, but if we don't insert.
But I
So
see something written.
Right, yeah, I get that.
Instead of confirmed.
Hold on one second, we'll go Councilmember Lovett, and then the mayor, and then we'll go on to Councilmember Naflin.
My concern is really just with the being vague, in that like there's the plan. And like in the plan, you say, okay, I want to do a mural representing this, that, or the other thing, and it's gonna be X amount, I think it's gonna be X amount of dollars, and then there's the work. The work is what's talked about in here. And so the work is actually way more specific. You're talking about design, you're talking about the actual thing we're looking at. Unless we're thinking we're gonna see the actual work or an iteration therein when we're doing the budget, then it is a little strange to not have an approval when the work is actually prevented. So to me, those are two different things. The plan is one thing and the work is another thing. And having the cultural commission approve the work, well, that's separate from the plan. And so I agree with the other council members who have said that language is a little bit sticky because I don't think those two things necessarily are always the same thing. Whereas, and it also, this is the public art policy, so I definitely wouldn't want to, although Summerscan selection, that would be great, but I don't think that's covered under the umbrella of this, and it is the art policy, but I do think just to delineate that a little bit, the work and the plan, I don't know that those are the same thing, and they could change iteratively throughout that process.
Did I say what's next, or Lisa, do you want to respond really quick, or?
I was just gonna say, you know, if the cultural commission has to have every piece of art approved by the city council, what's the point of having a cultural commission? It doesn't make sense, because there are going to be 7 people with 7 different opinions on the cultural commission, and they have to work together to come with recommendations for the art. Many of the people on the docket for the appointment tonight have significant, legitimate professional background in the arts, including degrees and businesses. And, you know, if we're going to have a cultural commission, they should be approving, making recommendations and anything more than a rubber stamp of the city council after it's already gone through the administrative process and potentially even legal process. If there's anything questionable, I have no doubt that our city administrator would make sure that before that commission makes a decision, that there would be legal advice given if there were any question. It just doesn't make sense to come back to council, and that's, I think that our cultural commissioners in general, previously and today, would probably end up questioning why they were even there, at that first time that a council disagrees with the art that they put forward.
I agree that the role of an advisory committee is to provide recommendation, but I don't want to mix up recommendation and approval. I think the council, just like with other advisory bodies like planning commission and other things, accept the recommendation and likely approve it. I mean, very rarely does the council go against. It's just that final step. So I don't think the intention there is to, you know, I think what is the point of DCC is, well, to do all that work and to bring forward a recommendation, and then it's just that final check. So I get what you're saying, but I think the goal of any advisory body is to provide recommendation to the council for approval.
So, sorry.
Go ahead, and then.
Yeah, I think this kind of, I know we've talked about, selecting musicians or this or that. That's not what I think the old policy said, or even the intent. For example, one thing it said is all public art of a long-term or permanent nature of a year or longer shall be approved by the art selection council. I don't think there was ever an intent that you couldn't even like have the commission help figure out which bands, or do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think that that is how it worked, and I don't think that the old policy required it, but it's more, if we're investing $500,000 in art related to a new city hall or a Main Street, the commission would work, you know, to make a recommendation, but then it would go through a process of final approval. I feel like we're using examples of extreme granularity to argue against something that is actually quite reasonable.
Did you want to chime in, or?
Yeah, I have a higher level question. Is the intent here to mimic the process of the planning commission? And that the planning commission approves items that ultimately get, for the most part, get put on a consent for council approval. Is that the intent here?
That's what was brought up before, as compared to how, you know, they would have more formal meetings like planning commission and have public comment, but I'll go to councilman first.
Yeah, and I was gonna actually split the difference, because I sort of come down on both sides with the mirrors and then my own comments. My concern wasn't, you know, to second guess, because I do think there should be some autonomy, there's expertise with the selection criteria went into these roles. I think my concern was, nowhere does it say, and this specifically addresses the point that the mayor brought up, that they operated autonomously. And the way I read this, it's autonomous approval of the things, it's autonomous approval. Yes, the plan, we have input into, but as you read is, establishing, improving, approving the session, carrying deaccession, reviewing, they're operating, I mean, it's as if they're a standalone body doing all these things. And so my only concern was, I want them to go off and ruminate and come up with things and be really creative and take the pulse of the community and come up with some great artwork. And I would expect that they're gonna go off and operate, in their, come back, operate off the guidance we provided in the plan. I just think the language in here is so, it doesn't even use the word recommend anywhere in there. It's all about approval. So that was my only area of concern is it's defined in a way that they are autonomous. And if the intent is for them not to be totally autonomous, there should be a little bit of some supplemental language in there to indicate that either we have a role to provide additional, whatever the tool needs to be so that council can provide feedback during that process.
Councilmember Supple?
Well, I guess I don't have a clear understanding of the workflow of the commission with the vis-a-vis the council, because I'm not sure what they're gonna be doing. And then when does what they do get handed off to the, to us, and what do we do once we receive it? Do we send it back or approve it or whatever? It's not, the workflow is not clear to me as how the cultural commission is gonna work with the city council.
You wanna address that or?
Yeah, first Director Lanchevsky,
So for a little perspective in history, commission was charged with selecting artists for Main Street. So you have the wood panel installations and the 3 art pieces going down to the park. That never went. The commission selected the artists, they went to work, they were installed. So that's just how it worked. I don't care how it works, but just so you understand, the largest installations we have right there, that part of the process is entrusted to those folks to find the people to do the work.
It seems to me that the question isn't adding more to 2.1, it's refining 2.2, specifically the last 2 sentences that read, the cultural commission approves works of art before they're required transferred, cultural commission approved public art in Duvall, and reviews of public art projects. So that seems to be what needs to be amended, not necessarily to add more to 2.1, but to change 2.2 to reflect more of the interests council has in what I think I'm hearing is to replicate a process which was not done in the past, to Director Lanchevsky's point. The Cultural Commission acted very autonomously than what we're structuring here. Have it be more of a recommendation body, very similar to planning, that for projects of, some import or amount or long-term, whatever, that you want it to be approved, tacitly approved or conditionally approved by the Cultural Commission with final approval to council. Is that kind of what I'm hearing? Because I'm trying to figure out what way to go.
Councilmember Supple?
Yeah, is that for every piece of art or every project, or, I don't quite understand how the commission's kind of operating, with respect to, are they gonna have open, we talked about having a fee for different, competitions, I guess it's called. Are we gonna be, whatever they recommend, they're gonna come to the city council and say, we recommend this for this competition, do we approve it? I'm kind of leaning back toward where there's kind of autonomous and letting them do their own thing. And not, I mean, we're involved with them with respect that this is your budget and this is the policy you need to follow. And do your job. That's kind of what I'm leaning toward.
And just one follow-up, because I'm actually looking at, how it was defined previously. On the current city website, it does talk about, it's a recommendation body. So that's how we define it. But it operated autonomously as an independent body I'm fine saying approval, I just really am looking for something like subject to final, or I didn't want to say veto, because that's negative, but there should be some override at the council level, otherwise I'm fine then going off and 99% of the stuff is gonna operate. I just want to make sure that we have a mechanism if we do find something, because at the end of the day, if the community is unhappy with art, they're gonna come to the council, they're not gonna come to the commission, and that's where I would want it.
We'll go with Councilmember Levitt and then Shaker.
I think that's really well put, very succinct, and I also think that you think about the planning process up front, and council should, in that planning process, be able to identify the 3 to 4 projects that they may want to actually look at a deeper level, and then everything else would be the pass-through.
Yeah.
Would think.
Councilmember Shaker.
And I was gonna reiterate the same thing Corey just talked about. I think Cynthia originally mentioned that, as part of the plan, we, the council, can be very clear on what we want to be involved with and what we don't want to be involved with. Because I think there's a lot of projects that we probably don't want to be involved with. And we can pick and choose, per the plan, what those are.
So it sounds like we just need a little more clarification here to outline the workflow, that art plan would be the place that council would every 2 years, look at and say, here's what we want to be involved with or have a final, stamp on to that. I'm sure you can look through and find places to maybe re-clarify that, or
I think what I would anticipate doing is revise the last 2 sections in 2.2 that specify following the adoption of the biennial art plan, that items of work or projects that are designated as requiring council approval or some language like that will be submitted to council for consent or something. Does that get
sound pretty good to her? Sounds like it.
without adding a bunch?
Yeah. So we're at 6:57. I think we're almost at the end of this. And I know we had one more item on I'm wondering for the agenda bill 23-70, if it'd be fine to add that onto our council meeting tonight,
Yeah,
because I know that's a quick check-in on it.
and I would recommend, that we do it immediately. Well, add it to unfinished business is the top one, so that our finance director doesn't have to wait until the end of the event.
Unless you want to go over schedule and go past time, it's up to you though.
I think, well, it'll take more than 3 minutes.
Okay.
So I think we should just add it to the first item of unfinished business, but it's actually.
And then, Cynthia, we're almost there. We have a little bit more, so we might have to finish this. Do you want to add it to tonight and try and power through it and get it? I would like to.
I anticipated that we might not get through it, which is why it's under subpart 3.
Okay.
Finished business.
Oh, perfect. So it's already done. Okay. So with that, just make sure everyone can take a quick break before the council meeting starts. We'll go ahead and adjourn at 6:58 PM. Sorry, we didn't get to that.
I'd like to call the Tuesday, October 17th, Duvall City Council meeting to order. And would you all please rise and join me in the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will you please take the roll?
Certainly, Mayor Overgander,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Henry,
Here.
Mr. Isaacson, Mr. Shaker, Mr. Mercer,
Here.
Mr. Supple,
Here.
Ms. Naplan,
Here.
Mr. Lovett.
Here.
Thank you, we have a forum. Under additions and corrections to the agenda, we did not get to Agenda Bill 23-70 and Committee of the Whole, and I would like to place that under number 1 of unfinished business, so our finance director doesn't have to wait too long this evening. Does anyone have any other additions or corrections to the agenda? Okay. Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve this evening's agenda? So moved.
So.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. We don't have any presentations this evening, but we do have proclamations. First one that I'll have the clerk read into the record is Minority Enterprise Development Week.
Whereas the strength and prosperity of our nation are deeply rooted in the diversity of its people and the contributions of minority entrepreneurs, and whereas minority-owned businesses play a vital role in driving economic growth, innovation, and job creation within our community and across the nation, and whereas the success and resilience of minority entrepreneurs serve as a testament to their determination, dedication, entrepreneurial spirit, and whereas Minority Enterprise Development Week is a time-honored tradition that recognizes and celebrates the accomplishments and potential of minority-owned enterprises, and whereas this annual observance provides a unique opportunity to highlight the importance of promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion within our business community, and whereas fostering an environment that encourages and supports the growth of minority-owned businesses is essential for a vibrant and equitable economy. Now, therefore, I, Amy Overlander, Mayor of the City of Duvall, hereby proclaim the week of October 22nd, 2023, to be Minority Enterprise Development Week. I call upon all residents, businesses, government agencies, and community organizations to participate in this observance by recognizing and celebrating the contributions of minority-owned businesses to our community and the nation's economy, supporting and patronizing minority-owned businesses through partnerships, collaborations, and purchases, providing resources, mentorship, and opportunities to empower aspiring minority entrepreneurs, promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion within our business practices and workforce, continuing our commitment to create an environment that fosters the growth and success of minority-owned enterprises. Let us come together during Minority Enterprise Development Week to reaffirm our dedication to building an inclusive and equitable economy that benefits all community members. Signed by the Mayor.
Thank you. The next proclamation is National Breast Cancer Awareness Month.
Whereas breast cancer is a formidable adversary that affects millions of individuals and families around the world, challenging their physical and emotional well-being, and whereas breast cancer is the most diagnosed cancer amongst women worldwide, and it knows no boundaries, affecting individuals regardless of race, age, or socioeconomic status, and whereas the month of October has been dedicated to raising awareness about breast cancer and promoting early detection, prevention, and support for those affected by this disease, and whereas National Breast Cancer Awareness Month provides a vital opportunity for communities, organizations, and individuals to come together to honor survivors, remember those we have lost, and work collectively to combat this devastating illness, and whereas tremendous progress has been made in the fight against breast cancer through advancements in research, early detection methods, and improved treatment options, offering hope to those facing this diagnosis. And whereas there is still much work to be done to eradicate breast cancer, reduce disparities in access to care, and provide support for survivors and their families. And whereas by uniting in our efforts, we can create a future where breast cancer is a preventable and treatable condition, where no one must endure the pain and suffering it brings. Now therefore, I, Amy Operlander, Mayor of the City of Duvall, do hereby proclaim the month of October as National Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I urge all residents, businesses, healthcare organizations, and community groups to participate in activities and initiatives that raise awareness about breast cancer, provide education on early detection, and support those affected by this disease. Let us come together as a community, stand in solidarity with those affected by breast cancer, and work tirelessly to ensure that one day breast cancer will no longer be a threat to our loved ones. Together, we can make a difference, provide hope, and move closer to a world free from the burden of breast cancer. Signed by the Mayor.
Thank you, Clerk. And the final proclamation this evening is Arbor Day.
Whereas in 1872, the Nebraska Board of Agriculture established a special day to be set aside for the planting of trees, and whereas this holiday called Arbor Day was first observed in the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can be a solution to combating climate change by reducing the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cutting, heating, and cooling products, moderating the temperature, cleaning the air, producing life-giving oxygen, and providing habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products, and whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the community vitality, the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community, and whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now therefore, I, Amy Operlander, Mayor of the City of Duvall, do hereby proclaim October 21st, 2023 as Arbor Day in the City of Duvall, and I urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands. And further, I urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations. Signed by the Mayor.
Thank you, Clerk. Moving on to comments from the audience. I know we have one email that was to be read into the record. I'll have the clerk do that first.
Hello, City Council members. Thank you for your service to the community of Duvall. As a resident of Duvall for 18 years, I would like to express my concern for the recent conversations regarding public art displays on city-owned property. I would ask that the council please consider avoiding artwork that references a person's sexual preference that aligns with a particular sexual ideology. With the increased sexualization of our children and the hyper-focus on sexual topics at inappropriate ages for children, I am concerned for the damaging effects of this is having on the children in our community. Public property should serve all ages of our community and is not an appropriate platform to promote a particular sexual ideology. I ask that you please consider artwork in public spaces that respect the age and stage of development of all the residents of Duvall, including young children. Please leave the topic of sexual preference and related issues to the parents and legal guardians who are entrusted to care for their children and help them navigate those themes. As the City Council, you have the opportunity to unite our community around artwork and themes that everyone of any age or ideology can mutually enjoy. Please avoid art contents that stirs up division and causes unnecessary focus on a particular individual's personal sexual preference. I appreciate your consideration in this, and I am hopeful that you will respect the many Duvall residents who share this viewpoint. Respectfully, Jeff Hansen, Duvall resident.
Thank you. And now I'll move to comments from the audience on site. Clerk, you have the list.
I do. Syra Hill.
Okay, if you could please approach the podium and provide your name, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak to any topic you wish.
No, I've been a resident for 12 years here in Duvall. I love this town. I attended a recent town hall forum here in Duvall. Our King County Councilwoman, Sarah Perry, spoke about our city. She gave us important insight and statistics about our city that evening. A question and answer time was included at that meeting. I submitted a question asking how a community can be unbiased and fair when allowing displays of flags and public artwork representing the people in our community, including those with religious viewpoints. Our mayor, who was part of the forum, answered my question by quoting part of the First Amendment. It forbids the establishment of religion on government property. However, included in this same amendment, there is a clause that states we are guaranteed free speech. There have been several cases brought to the U.S. Supreme Court where it has been ruled that when the government does not speak for itself, it may not exclude private speech based on religious viewpoints. There is a crucial difference between government speech endorsing a religion and private speech endorsing a religion, which free speech and free exercise thereof guarantees. Anti-religious policies and practices in a city violates our free speech rights. Going back to my opening remarks tonight about the town hall meeting, Sarah Perry made an observation about our town and it grabbed my attention. She stated that Duvall seems to be lacking a special identity that should be recognized by others who live here, shop here, and enjoy our area. What type of identity do we need that our King County Councilwoman has suggested we prioritize? How do we make a name for ourselves just as other cities have done? The new policies and guidelines for the Cultural Art Commission may give us the opportunity to find the needed identity by attractive displays of art, history, flags, and family-friendly activities and parades. Our guaranteed right of free speech under the First Amendment should be carefully intertwined in this identity. I'm going to ask you, I brought some pictures. I brought pictures before one of the other council meetings. Could you pass that to the council members, please? The last thing I want to say tonight is, think about this type of identity and the public activity that goes
You have
on.
30 seconds.
It has infiltrated many communities across our great nation. It is my concern and hope that the type of identity will not be known here in Duvall. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for the public comment here?
There's none on the list, Mayor.
Okay,
But,
if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak, you may approach the podium, provide your name, and have 3 minutes to speak to any topic you wish.
My name is Carol Duvall. I live here in Duvall. I would like to add a rebuttal to the previous 2 statements. While I'm sure that we will have public art that addresses all kinds of our cultural past and our history and other cool things, it is vitally important that we recognize and provide safe space and recognition to our LGBTQIA community. This is a community that has been marginalized, they've been threatened, their rights are being threatened of being taken away. They have fought for every right they have. And there's lots of people in this room tonight that would like to have them taken away. So they can go back in the closet and never, ever come out again. And that cannot happen. Many of us in this room have LGBTQIA family members and friends and people we love. And we don't want them back in the closet. We don't want them to have to live a life that is constrained. And frankly, it's not right. You know, if you had to close off part of your life, you know, suppose we lived in a world where it wasn't the norm to be straight and white and married. And you had to pretend that you weren't married, that your husband wasn't your husband, he was just a friend. How lovely would your life be? It would suck. And we cannot go back to that. We will not. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone online wanting to provide public comment this evening?
If you're online and would like to speak, please raise your hand. No,
Let's see. Did I miss anyone in the audience?
Are you calling me?
Anyone that,
I did sign up as a speaker,
you're
but
welcome,
after this lady, I would like to speak.
you're welcome, yes.
I'd like to rebut the rebuttal. I'm sure that all of us that would be opposed to the LBG community, you know, we don't hate these people. What we do believe, however, is that they're taking their sexual aspirations at places we don't want to go there. If you've looked at this handout, you'll see exactly what I mean. We don't want this in our community, but, and I said this, I think, on the meeting September the 5th, was it? You know, we don't have a thing against these people. We want to let them express themselves, but not in some of the ways that they would like to. You know, their sexual situation belongs in their bedroom, period. It's not on the streets. You know, they've chosen to go that lifestyle, and I mentioned back then, when I spoke earlier, I gave all the statistics. The lifestyle is not healthy. So I would pray for these people that they would see that it's harmful to them, and they would change the way they're living. That's kind of all I would like to say. I thank you for this. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Yes. Would like to. Okay, all right, moving on to the consent agenda. Let's approve this evening's consent agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. Moving on to scheduled items. First up is the mayor's report. Sound Cities Association board meeting is tomorrow, so I will be attending. Sound Cities Association also has a call out for all of the regional boards and commissions. Applications are due November 13th. A reminder for our council, if you are currently serving on a committee and want to continue, you do need to put in a new application. If anybody is applying for committees, I would suggest please email Cynthia so that we can stay in line with OPMA, but we also need to make sure that no more than one person applies for any given committee, because if two people apply from the city, they will essentially get automatically thrown out from the nominations committee, because some cities does not get involved in disputes between different council members and councils. That rarely ever happens, but it does happen, so needed to be said. Not with Duvall, but other jurisdictions that has. And again, those nominations are due on the 13th. On next Wednesday, for anybody that's interested, the Sound Cities Association networking event will be down at the Renton Pavilion Center. I will be in attendance. There's also the Association of Washington Cities Elected Officials Essentials, December 9th. Some of those will be in virtual, some of them will be in person. I will be in person at the Wenatchee location for my role as AWC Vice President. And for anybody that hasn't done it, I highly recommend it. And for those that have, and it's been a couple of years, it's a great opportunity for a refresher, as well as to meet the influx of new elected officials that will be coming into office and working with our cities beginning in January. Last item is that I had the opportunity to help open the Association of Washington Cities Mayors Exchange in Leavenworth. I will say that it was the most diverse group of mayors that we've ever had from all parts of the state. The interesting topic du jour when there were updates from communities was the need for emergency management and good emergency management in your cities. We had 6 mayors there from different parts of the state, all of which had been part of federally declared disasters, and that was not including Duvall a few years ago when we had Snowmageddon. It's becoming a huge topic of interest for the mayors to make sure that they have the tools necessary to manage those disasters when they do occur. As we can see in the last few years, just looking around the room, most of those huge disasters have occurred in the last 5 years. So they're increasing, the need is increasing. Of course, prominent message that comes out from those that have been through very large disasters is there's no one there to help. So if your city isn't prepared, even if your city is prepared, you will be overwhelmed, but if you're not prepared, it's a heck of a lot more difficult to come out and begin your recovery. That includes making sure we're up to date on all of our federal policies that we're required to have in order to receive that federal funding when it does come around. And that concludes our report. Any questions? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the city administrator's report.
Good evening, council, mayor, staff, members of the community. Cynthia McNabb, city administrator. So.
1 second, please.
Sure. Next slide. So just an update on some of our upcoming events and meetings. So thank you to council members who have already brought candy to City Hall for our Halloween candy handout, which is sponsored by the chamber. Again, any council member who wants to come and help hand out candy or dress up, all are welcome. Couple of us in City Hall have already picked our costumes and we'll be there. Well, maybe it's just me. I have 2 costumes. I'll be there. Decide which one. But we'll be there to hand out candy to our community members who come by City Hall. We do have a current opening on planning commission. So anyone you know who would like to participate and be one of our planning commissioners, please direct them to the website to the application so we can fill our planning commission seat. And then we have Light of Duvall, that's been now scheduled firm date for December 1st. We're still finding out if we have the holiday heifer that will be coming to Light of Duvall. But there is a place for the holiday heifer if we have a baby cow available. But all the usual, we have Santa and Boy Scouts, so all the work is getting put together for Light of Duvall. This year, we will have market vendors to create kind of a market environment. So we're pretty excited about that and having it look and feel a little different this year with kind of more opportunities to shop for the holidays at Light of Duvall this year. Next slide. So if Director Thomas is on, I'll have her present on the community development slides.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This evening, I'm going to give a quick update. Riverview School District School Impact Fee hearing is scheduled for 11/7, and we should have that wrapped up by the end of November. We have 2 pre-applications, one set for 10/25 and one set for 11/1. Both items are for non-residential development, and we're currently working on the review of those pre-apps. The sign code update is set for its first workshop in November with the Planning Commission, and then we'll come back to City Council for an update in December on the 19th. Plan reviews are up. About half of them are new and half of them are resubmittals. Between Troy, Acela, and I, we probably have
Chief Rose.
Give her a moment. Okay. Well, certainly Director Thomas knows more about the work in her department than I do, but you'll see, we talked about it this afternoon, actually, lots of landscape performance actively happening here in the city. So this is the time of year where you see a lot of tree replanting and replacement. And then year 2 to the Commerce Grant for CP and development regulations is scheduled for December. Next slide. And then next week, the Park Trails and Open Space Survey will be mailed. on Monday to community members, with a survey sample of 2,300. The big comp plan, the public participation plan resolution is scheduled for the 11/7 council meeting, for council to consider that public participation plan. And then in November, we have 2 legislative memos that will be in written reports, an environmental legislative memo as well as a housing legislative memo. That the memos are designed to help staff during the CPA development standard amendment process. So those will be in council packets in November. Next slide. I'm gonna hand it off to Director Laniszewski for the public works update.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, citizens, staff, Steve Laniszewski, Public Works. So just a few notes, even on emergency management. Our new emergency management coordinator is in some training that has to do with auspicious attacks and other things of that nature. So he's there for 3 days, it's local, but he's at Redmond's Community Company Emergency Command Center. And then also on your way in, I don't know if you noticed, but the defibrillator is installed in this facility. So those are new, those are easy to use, open up and listen to the machine. Remember, the person is talking, they don't need to be applied CPR to. Third Avenue project, I wasn't sure if we said anything out yet, we did find out late last week that we were the recipient of $800,000 from the King County Flood Control District for flood reduction grant for the culvert portion of the project. So that's separated from the project or in the project that's eligible for expenditure and construction on with that grant. Change order 3, just a note, we passed that, I think a meeting or 2 ago, $52,000 in change. The final negotiation of the work, it will be $37,000 in change, just advising. We're keeping budget work in review and the water shortage advisory is still in effect. The good news is it is trending down on a daily consumption basis. Last meeting, we were at 116, so 116 gallons a day, million gallons a day average, we're down to 109. Speed feedback signs, so in the budget, we did have 2 speed feedback signs this year, a mobile one this year and another one next year. So that's $11,000 and a $3,500 budget in each of those years. We have the 2 fixed mounted and 1 mobile quasi soft mounted signs received and are going in. There's a little image on the bottom and for folks here, the words are covering the little map. But how we just, we did just pick streets for fun, work with police, worked on the steep slope nature of certain areas, the vicinity to schools, the vicinity to homes. I.e. Big Rock has a few homes, Stevens has many homes accessing, so that's just kind of how that evaluation was looked at. And then previous compliance went on compliance with our mobile speed trailer, which we still do have. So fixed mounted signs are going to go up on 145th east of 3rd Avenue and downhill direction, of course, going west. And same on 150, actually just west of 278. For fun, the speed trailer, we just moved away from there last week. We had 45% compliance, which is terrible. And then I want to share, I believe the 45% that was compliant is probably most of the people coming off of 278, getting onto the main thoroughfare. So basically straight travelers are 0% compliant. It's a bad spot. We did pontificate a little on moving the sign up east of 278 because you'd like to try to avoid speed interactivity between intersections, but I didn't think we'd get some clear use, and I feared more what do you call it, distraction ahead of the intersection since it's so tough already. So they are like the fixed mounted, they are kind of mobile, but they will be going up. And, we will try to refresh those on a yearly basis because people will become blind to those at the time. So I think that's it.
All right, thank you. And then next slide.
Councilmember Schaefer has a question.
Yeah, Steve, you say compliance, So does it keep track of the count of cars that go on the speed limit or what?
Yeah, and good question there, Councilmember Schaefer. So technically compliance out of the speed area is 85% compliant. So 85% of the travelers complying with the speed is the goal.
But it doesn't differentiate between, like, if the speed limit is 25, it doesn't differentiate between going 30 or 40.
It's to the exactness per person, per traveler. So we have an output of data that. Exactly.
Okay, yeah. Okay,
I saw that sure go.
yeah, okay, thanks.
No, yeah, we get clicks through the data, I can share that.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thank you.
That's good, and it is a good tool.
Yeah,
Councilmember Napoli?
Yeah, I have a different question, but it makes me wonder, how many people were going faster than 30? Like, what was the, you know what I mean? It'd be really,
Yes,
it'd be super interesting to see, you know, how egregious are these speeders?
59 was high.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, so my actual question and why I raised my hand was, I was excited to hear we have a match defibrillator. That's exciting. And one thing that I'd always been hopeful for was one up at Big Rock. And so I don't know if there's been any work on that. I know there's an organization called Nick of Time that has a project right now where they're trying to get them in sport fields. And I know an outdoor one is a little bit different. It's not secure, it's faces the weather, but I've been in a little bit of communication with them, and I know there's interested community members that would love to fundraise or, you know, but then there needs to be an agency willing to manage it, which has cost. So anyway, I don't know if that's something that others would be interested, or even if you've already looked into that, but I think the community would bring the money forward to buy it if there was interest in staff or a partner to maintain it. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
So we did one here, one with ED and one at City Hall, so 3, or fire head, whatever they have. We can look into it. Luke is not trained and certified in Washington State, however, he is previously been trained as a automatic defibrillator trainer, instructor, and servicer. So he will be working on those credentials. I'm gonna expect if it's exteriorly mounted for anybody's access or public to inspect it weekly, maybe, just to one, make sure it's there, to make sure it works. You can have somebody go through it and grab it and it may not work, right? Not that kids are kids, but kids are kids, so they mess with all the junk, with cameras. So, yeah, that's good. I wonder if you could set up like free class kind of thing.
They have actual units that, outdoor units that actually remote monitor them, and I don't know, maybe you know. Yeah.
But, yeah, we had talked about it, so we'd love to come up with some creative ideas.
And then the final slide, so we have chosen November 9th as our staff training and service day. So we'll spend the first part of the day doing staff training on diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, team building, kind of health and wellness activities for the staff. And then in the afternoon, staff will be given the option of doing service projects with our community, or it's not compulsory, so if staff want to come back to work, that's okay too. So next week we will be sending out information to our community partners to see if we can match volunteer opportunities with city staff in the community. We are doing a snowplow naming contest. Director Malashevsky got to tell you that earlier today. So the school district has agreed to a contest with their elementary schoolers on voting. It'll open in the middle of November and it'll extend through Thanksgiving, and then we will pick a name for a city snowplow.
Two more things.
Two more things? Yes.
We did look and are looking at exterior lighting for the structure, the building, the parking lot, as was noted last time, and then State Road 203 north of town at the Farm Road, Old Cherry Valley is getting a roundabout. Construction begins April, June timeline. It's on their website if you're interested. It's the craziest roundabout I've seen, so it ought to be very exciting.
Where is it at?
North of town, just before you get to Monroe at the Old Cherry Valley. Well, I don't, yeah, Yeah.
Cherry Valley Road, so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the northern end, not the one at 3 miles.
Yeah.
The one that's.
Okay.
Who's paying for it?
It's where they have the signal too, where like, traffic oncoming. where they hold up to-
There've been multiple fatalities
Yeah.
over the last few years.
So, just a heads up, sorry, I forgot.
Quick question about sort of the first bullet point, obviously the staff training is for staff. If council members wanted to participate in the survey day, is that?
Absolutely, yeah, we'll send information to council as well.
Thank you.
And then the final thing in your council packet, our community events coordinator, Rita developed 2 signs for your consideration. And these are signs that we would put on entry points into the city. One is, as you know, welcome, we're building an inclusive community, all are welcome here. The other is, we welcome all races, religions, countries of origin, sexual orientations, genders, abilities. We stand together. These would be kind of similar to Tree USA signs. There was a council request to put those together. They're pretty inexpensive to produce. We have somebody who produces signage for the city, and we could produce them fairly quickly. And so my question to council is, if you're interested, what process would you like for moving forward on this project? You know, take a look at what we put together. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward signage. If you'd like to see something different, please let us know. But we've done the groundwork on this, so, you know, finding out how quickly we could do it. I think for signage coming into the city at the different entry points into the city, I think total, it would be, about $1,000 to produce the signage. I mean, with the assumption that it would have to be, signage would have to be replaced. Hoping that we wouldn't have to plan for vandalism, but I think, we should also plan for vandalism, so. Please let me know how you would like to proceed, and we're happy to do so.
Mayor Agenda Kennedy and then Councilmember Shaver.
I'm really excited about that. I just wanted to, did you send an email with images or we're not at that point yet? I just
They're
wasn't
in
sure.
the council packet.
Under what?
Sorry, they would-
They were on, yeah.
Okay. I was just making sure because I thought.
Okay, I
Maybe you
will
can
send them
email us.
right now.
Yeah, but anyways, I think the kind of signs you're describing are, I think great. And, I don't know in terms of what process, I mean, just maybe some kind of final design, end up on consent or something. I don't know how that, or maybe it would need to be consent, I'm not sure, but, anyways, yeah. I would like to see whatever the final sign would end up being.
Can we, oh, there we go. Thank you, Clerk Patera. We also, Clerk Patera has also offered and has translated them into Spanish as well, and we could potentially translate them into other languages. Thank you.
And I do want to give a shout out to Mayor Agenda Kennedy because she's had some really good ideas. That was Ron's, idea. That one was Ron's, okay. Both of you have actually had some really good ideas on, how we can really identify our city as an inclusive community and really reinforce that everyone is welcome here. And so I really appreciate the creativity and that each of them have put into this as the months have gone on. So thank you for that.
Right. And these would actually be signed and opposed to banners, is that correct?
Right, so, well, I'm short, so I don't know how big they actually are on the signage. So when you come into the city with, where you see, it's often with a speed limit, and they'll say like Tree City USA, those kind of city designation.
Yeah, right.
I think they're probably made of some metal, so.
But comparable to those.
Yeah, I guess big, yeah.
Councilmember Mercer.
Yeah, I was gonna sort of raise this as a council report, sort of thank you, Cynthia and staff for sort of the investigation work you did. I think the other sort of call out for me, and, I attended Sarah Perry's, and Mayor Pro Tem was there as well, town hall, and amongst the three presentations, Empower Youth did a lot in terms of feedback on the youth survey, but I think one of the key takeaways at the end was really about the epidemic of loneliness and sort of the need for belonging in community. And just based on the feedback, regardless of, whether it's part of economic development, whether it's building sort of a sustaining, nurturing community, I think, knowing you're part of the community and specifically having it articulated, helps build bridges, but it also, welcomes, we've got a lot of new people moving to the community, different demographic, younger folks, and I think, putting sort of our city's values out there, is really helps with that, goals and really making folks feel that they belong. So again, thank you.
Great.
I have one more quick thing that I just thought of, when we get to a stage where, it goes forward and all that, is there a way to possibly offer like a PDF version of it to businesses who want to print one and put it in their window or something like that? It might increase visibility.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we could also send it over to the library as well. I'm sure that they would welcome having it. Thank you. And with that concludes the city administrator report. If there are any questions, happy to answer them.
Not seeing any. Moving on to council reports, do any council members have any activities for the last 2 weeks that you'd like to report? Councilmember now.
Yes, I won't go into any details, but I did attend the outdoor recreation action team meeting and the East Side Transportation Partnership meeting and the Snohomish Valley Mobility Coalition. Hopefully I said them all correctly, so.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, go ahead, Mayor.
Sorry, really quick, and I'm like always trying, I need to write this stuff down ahead of time. Yeah, but something to keep in mind as we come to the end of the year, and I know the mayor already mentioned the SCA stuff, like the different committees via SCA is the PIC committee. I've been serving on that. I attended that this last week, virtually. A lot of them are still virtual, but they're choosing to do some kind of quarterly in person, but they seem to still offer a hybrid option. So just throwing that out there, I think I could probably continue serving on it next year. So I'd be happy to do that. And I think we make that decision in December, or I can't remember when, sometime to align with the other.
In December.
Yeah.
For January.
So, but we still need an alternate, and then of course, if anyone else is really wanting to do it, I would be happy to let that go too. But, I think I could still do it next year, given their hybrid option. So just want to put that out there.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to presentations. So we did have presentations, different place on the agenda than normal. I'm used to seeing it. So we do have a report from the Economic Development Subcommittee, led by City Administrator right now.
So I just wanted to bring this because the subcommittee of City Council on Economic Development has been meeting. And so we just wanted to touch base with council on those activities, like what grants came in. So I won't do a ton of presentation because we have the subcommittee here. But the projects that we've discussed for, semi-planned, so this is just a touch point to let council know the work that is happening. We've talked about Big Rock Road banner poles. We have estimates, the early estimates, or that project would be roughly $60,000. So it might come in a little under. That's just kind of an initial, tossing out of a number from the contractor that did our last banner poles. Summer stage supply refresh, we have quite a bit of, A-frames and banners and stuff for summer stage, so getting those refreshed. And then potentially the kind of current plan is to sponsor a restaurant music crawl as part of the economic development activities. Things that we're looking at, and we talked about today within city administration, that the economic development subcommittee asked city staff to take a look at would be hanging flower baskets. So we are pricing a bunch of different options, as well as looking, so the thing that we thought today would make the most sense for an initial, kind of cost estimate is for all the brown poles that are not banner poles, that are the mile and change through the city, pricing out what it would be for every single one of them, and then council can decide how many of them you want. And then we're looking at crosswalk improvements. We had a very entertaining, session. We meet every Tuesday as a leadership team on, different kinds of crosswalk improvements. Mainly, we're thinking for, down here on Main Street, but there is a beautiful crosswalk project, that one of the council members pointed out in the Netherlands, that prompted then a, review of this beautiful crosswalk sidewalk installation that was $3.7 million. It looks like Starry Nights. So there's lots of cool stuff, might be outside of our budget, but we are looking at all possible creative options for making these sidewalks here both more safe and more prominent. We are going to take a look at updating and, for beautification of the Rosenbach corner, and then looking at, EV charging stations in a city-owned parking lot and what that would take.
Councilmember Mercer?
Just one question about that last one. I know Councilmember Naplin sort of raised the EV charging stations in particular, and actually, this is a topic that came up at the town hall afterwards when I was chatting, but would there be any opportunity also, I don't know if you'd explored partnering with King County and doing it in the parking ride, down the parking ride, that might be another space as well, so I just wanted to bring that.
That is a space we're researching.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And then just wanted to update council, we did receive 3 grants, for 2023 economic development and tourism grants. The Duvall Foundation for the Arts, that has been approved, for $750. We're in the process of contracting that. We have 2 other grants that came in, Oxbow and Hillside Academy, that are still in review. And so once we decide, or the city council subcommittee decides, what we can do for the 2 grant opportunities to fulfill them, we will, bring back to council what those final amounts were. We will be issuing the new application for 2024, beginning, late December, January. We've modified the application a little bit to ask that those who, put in for a grant give us a little more data to tell us, how many people came to their event, so we can track a little better, as well as one of the exhibits to the application will be a marketing or advertising plan. So we made those corrections last week to the application and to the contract that our grant recipients will get. So that's my update, but I turn it over to the subcommittee if you want to add anything.
Councilmember Schaefer?
Nothing really to add, but just to kind of reiterate, each of these projects is relatively low hanging fruit. None of these are terribly expensive or terribly difficult to pull off, other than needing Steve's staff time. We certainly do need some of that, but as a whole, I believe they're going to make a significant difference in Duvall as far as helping our current businesses, as far as attracting more out-of-town business, building pride within the community. I think this is really gonna go a long way. So I'm very pleased that we have this process started, and I thank Cynthia and Steve and all the other staff that's gonna be helping out with that.
Thank you. Moving on to unfinished business, we have the first item, which is a property tax ordinance for introduction. Agenda Bill 23-70 with our new finance director, Beth McLean.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff, community. This Beth McMahon, the new finance director for the city. This is the start of my 3rd week on the job, so I don't have a formal presentation. But we have received the information from the county on what our property levy limits are. I'm happy to discuss any information.
So if Beth, if you have the numbers to share and kind of built into an ordinance, I think that might help just to.
I do have that.
So the goal today is to kind of, do a first touch on the property tax, numbers that have come in from the county. On the 7th, we're going to have, so the meeting on November 7th, we'll have 3 public hearings, just so everyone knows. The way the state process works, there's a cadence to it. So the first public hearing will be our revenue hearing. That has to be done prior to the property tax levy, which will be second on the 7th, where we will consider the property taxes and whether to take our full authorized amount or potentially bank amount. And then the final hearing for the 7th will be the Riverview School District impact fees. So none of the hearings are particularly time consuming, but each of them absolutely essential to get through the budget process.
Don, I sent the documents to you, to your email. I don't know if you can pull them up.
Sure.
The other thing I would add is we're thinking about property taxes for this next year. We are anticipating some fairly sizable increases that will outpace the 1%. So we are in negotiations with our Teamsters bargaining unit. They have a certain way that they calculate, that contract has a certain way that it calculates COLA, but certainly it is projected that the COLA will be in excess of 1%. Our medical benefits that the city pays are in excess of 1%. We have a substantial increase again from WCIA on our insurance that far exceeds a 1% growth in that area. So even if the rest of the budget for general fund items remains completely static with no amendments or adjustments higher, the stuff that we have very little control over far exceeds 1% for next year.
Yeah, the actual 24 regular levy went forward. The increase projected between last year and this year is 18,000. And you can see that's a percentage increase of 28.3.
I know this is pretty familiar for most council members. Does anybody have any questions, or are you ready to roll? Councilmember Napoli?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, isn't the portion associated with new construction, that is part of what will become our new regular levy though, right? So actually, is our increase not?
So the increase doesn't include new construction.
But the amount that we will start receiving next year will be the 97 plus the 18.
Yes,
More
the total to
than
be the
before.
2,479,418. That's the total,
Got
which
it.
includes
Okay.
the 97,213 plus the refund.
So it's a pretty substantial increase when you consider the new construction then.
Yeah, I think the challenge is, and for folks to keep in mind, in addition to union collective bargaining, is that we already know that we're already, what is 160,000 more next year for our WCIA insurance. So those really skyrocketing basic city insurance rates are far exceeding our new revenues, specifically in property tax, and that's an essential function and requirement of a city to operate. So that's something to keep in mind, that our state property tax is arbitrary. It's an arbitrary 1%. It's literally based on a vote, and was ruled unconstitutional. So just to remember, that is on the Association of Washington Cities legislative agenda again this year, is to have a reasonable rate. I can't remember exactly what it is. It still would not keep up with inflation, but it would stabilize local governments across the state as far as property tax goes. So I think just one thing to keep in mind as we further the budget discussion.
So on the 11th, what you'll see is the very standard property tax ordinance, and a public hearing that, we bring every year with these numbers. If there are any questions, between now and, see, that's on the 7th, so like the second, when we would, normally put the council packet together, please let me know so we can answer them in advance. One of the reasons why we want to come tonight and show you the numbers is, as you all know, we are under an extreme deadline in November for getting that information in King County. So not only do we have to have the public hearing, the decision about whether to take the 1%, it has to be voted and approved with the decision back to King County by November 30th. So it's also one of the reasons why Mayor Pro Tem was asking about form for November. So please let me know if you have any questions, and we will see if we can answer them on the 7th. Thank you.
All right, moving on to Agenda Bill 23-72, appointment of cultural commission members for discussion and decision. City Administrator McNabb.
So we had 8 applications for our cultural commission. You have them all in the packet. With 7 seats to be appointed. One of our applicants was not eligible due simply to residency requirements. But of the other 7, all were interviewed. And those interview questions, every applicant was asked the same 5 questions, which were, tell us about why art is important to you, important to the community, what role art has in preserving the history of Duvall, the culture of Duvall. Each one of the applicants for the Cultural Commission gave really thoughtful, considered responses to the questions. And at this point, all of them are qualified, meet the qualifications for appointment to the Cultural Commission. Outside of that, I don't know that we have any other information to provide. The applications are in there, or in your council packet. And if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Councilmember Naplan and then Schaefer.
Yeah, I just had one question. I did notice that 2 of the applicants were from, I think, the same household. And I don't know if that's something we typically do. I guess I've never seen that before on a commission where 2 people from the same household are appointed to the same commission, but apparently it's not against the rules. I just was a little surprised by that.
We have no disqualification for roommates to be on the same commission.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Just a question about the number. I thought we had 5 minimum, but I guess our policy did not preclude having more. Is that correct? We have
5 minimum, maximum 7.
Okay, good. No, thanks. Just my reminder. Thank you.
Is council ready to take a motion?
Yes. Hold on a second. Let me find the right word.
You have it, I have it.
Oh, go ahead.
I recommend to confirm Mayor Alcalander's appointment of Brandy Damiana, Crystal Fraser, and Jennifer Hernandez, Lisa Roulette, Tom Tozer, and Wendy Imberg to the City of Duvall Cultural Commission. Hopefully I didn't butcher anyone's name.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. And clerk, do we have any of the new appointees on the line? If we do, they're welcome to raise their hand and introduce themselves.
I should also add that following appointment, we will be inviting our new commissioners to either the meeting on the 7th or the 21st, welcome them, and to have them come and meet city council.
Right. Please say that. And it looks like we have Jen Hernandez. Welcome, Jen.
Hello, can you hear me? I'm assuming you can hear me. I'm hoping you can hear me. I'm calling in from Texas right now and just wanted to say thank you for the vote of confidence. I'm hoping that I can work with you in the future at the best of my abilities to make sure that Duvall has its own artistic footprint in the Pacific Northwest. Thanks.
Thank you, Jen. And Wendy, looks like Wendy's on. Wendy, would you like to speak? Not seeing her hand.
Yeah, I've always felt that Duvall was a very special place and always was impressed by the level of the art and the quality of the art. And I'm excited that I get to continue to contribute to that continuation.
Thank you. Welcome and congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to Agenda Bill 23-75, purchasing policy. Hopefully for decision this evening. City Administrator McNabb.
So thank you. First, apologies, I emailed everyone earlier today while the purchasing policy and the final draft of it made it into the packet. I was out late last week and yesterday. So getting the agenda bill and the ordinance prepared in time for the packet didn't happen. So apologies, but you were all emailed it and I also printed off copies for all of you to have at your table. So we covered, so there are two things that the agenda bill does. We did ask City Attorney Kenny what the procedure would be to amend the Duvall municipal policy or to take out the provisions that were essentially substituting for the purchasing policy in the municipal code. And his recommendation was to prepare an ordinance, which you have here tonight. In the agenda bill, I kind of described why we took this approach, which is we would be adopting a new purchasing policy, which in some places contradicts and in some places duplicates between the municipal code and the purchasing policy. So the better approach would be to adopt the purchasing policy as the City of Duvall guidelines and procedures for purchasing, and have that be the council guidance and the authoritative document for purchasing within the city. So that's what we have tonight. The purchasing policy, the draft that was in the council packet are the changes that we talked about last meeting, and the edits I made consistent with, and the edits that Director Leszewski and City Attorney Kenny made consistent with council conversation last meeting. So happy to answer any questions that you may have. There are some edits and minor corrections that will need to be made as it gets finalized. The document that is in the council packet is still the bill draft form. And so there are, kind of minor edits that will have to be made before finalizing, but they're not substantive edits that need to be done, kind of corrections and grammar changes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
When we make a, motion to approve, do we need to note that? I remember in the past when we've approved something that might still have a few minor grammatical things or whatever, that sometimes we've said that, or is that not necessary to call that out in a motion?
Both can be true. So it's good practice to call it out, and if there are scrivener errors or kind of minor edits that aren't substantive, you don't have to, bring it back. But so you have recommended motions here. The first would be to approve Agenda Bill 2375, which approves the purchasing policy. By order of operation, you would have to approve the purchase policy first. And then the second piece would be to approve the ordinance, taking out those provisions in the municipal code, because you have to have one to replace the other, or to basically be the authoritative document.
Someone like to make a motion?
Go
ahead, Councilmember Shaker.
Agenda Bill 2375, approving the city of Duvall purchasing policy.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Hi.
All those opposed, please say no.
No.
Motion passes with one no. And there's a second motion.
I move to approve ordinance 1322, revising the Duvall municipal code consistent with the adoption of the 2023 Duvall purchasing policy.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Hi.
All those opposed, please say no.
No.
Motion passes. And with that, I want to thank the council. This has been 5 years in the making to get to this point. And city administrator has been working very hard over the last year to get it across the finish line. And I think that the process really sped up when it came to the full council for full conversation. And I appreciate all of the feedback council's provided, the discussions and questions that you had for staff to get us to a more modern, reasonable policy that will hopefully serve us for the next at least 5 years. So thank you, council, much appreciated. Moving on for further discussion on the public art policy.
Okay, where we left off. All right, so in 2.2, I'm going to make some changes. There was an important call out, the last bullet needs to be removed. Thank you, Councilmember Navlin, for highlighting that. This policy does not have resident initiated public art as part of the structure of it, and so we're gonna take that out. The next piece.
Councilor Devlin has a question.
As part of that same section, I was also concerned about approving temporary art projects requested via permit. I was worried similarly that if there is a art subjective and is expressing points of view, that having a body approve and then possibly not approve some could get us into legal trouble. And so I have the same concerns about approving projects via permit, because that doesn't sound like something that council initiated or council is trying to say we want this. It seems more resident initiated as well.
Yes, yeah, well, and I believe that was one that we would have through legal review, probably taken a look at. Because remember, this was put together back in August as a starting point, and then we had presentations on the plan sign code revisions as well. So this has taken a little while to get here, and in the meantime, we've had 2 or 3 other kind of city presentations. So yes, that's a good call out. In addition, the second bullet point, we are taking out based on legal review, all donations, so we'll be making that change as well. Councilmember Naplin, was there anything else in comment 10 that you wanted to add here? We talked about the public art database. Are we missing anything?
Oh, I think the only thing that I thought was really interesting in the existing policy is that it talked about if we have a large, a project within the budget, that council could consider how to integrate art in it. And so potentially staff would identify, hey, here's some projects that potentially could have art installed. Do you want to include that as a budget, just to identify certain types of projects? A road project or a building project, I think there's a lot of interest in having art in our community. And so, yeah, I don't know how that fits in, but it potentially within city departments, I don't know where that would be, or even the cultural commission, just to make sure we're always, keeping an eye out on capital projects, if there is room for art.
Under city department, we could add a section that, a second sentence there that says, city departments will review projects for potential artistic inclusion, something like that, would that work?
Yeah, and there was a related piece of, and I assume that would also encompass like grant opportunities as well, which is the other thing I didn't see included either as a responsibility of the cultural commission working in conjunction with staff.
Okay.
So just, in our prior conversation, talking about workflow and stuff, that just made me think something, so if the cultural commission, they are likely to come up with ideas, how does that work? Because like we've approved this art plan, so I'm assuming if things come up, there's kind of two options. One is they kind of add that to the parking lot to look at the next budget's art plan, or there's an opportunity, would they bring that to you and you bring that to us and say, this idea came up, maybe it's time dependent. Is that something you're anticipating? Maybe not right away, but that there could be a little backward movement in the workflow where we might get ideas from them as well, not just in the form of that overall art plan.
Right, so we're anticipating that staff, particularly Rita, our community events coordinator, will be very similar to where the planning commission operates, the staff liaison. And so as those meetings develop or the agenda develops and there's something that isn't, in the first year, we kind of have a plan, the outline of a plan, because we have so many projects that are waiting. And so that'll be put together, but if we see something or there's some mechanism where the cultural commission wants to speak to council or come to council and say, hey, this isn't in the budget, but we have this idea, it would probably operate the same way, which is we as staff will bring to council and then funnel back to the cultural commission and operate the same way.
Thank you.
And very similar to the question or the conversation before around contracts. The cultural commission could come up with grant ideas, but we have a process at city council for the city or the council to be told prior to the city going out for grants. There's an approval process and a notice process, and the same thing would apply. The cultural commission couldn't, they can't contract under a grant. It's the city that would put together those grant opportunities. Councilmember Mercer, did I hear though that you would like an addition of somewhere to talk about looking for grants or?
Well, I mean, again, it's sort of the policy versus the wrapper process, though I'm not concerned there. I'm assuming, funding stream is going to be part of the conversation and that would incorporate grants. So I was just calling it out because it wasn't, specifically discussed in the prior conversations, but yeah, I would assume that would be part of how we pay for specific commissions or public-private.
Yeah, certainly I would think, and I'm anticipating this feature. I don't know that it will be true, but hypothetically, if a biennial art project or art plan was adopted and then folded into the budgeting process, but mid-year, the next year, the cultural commission found some opportunity that could be grant funded and wanted to bring that to council to add it, that we would come to city council because the budget would have to be, first of all, council would have to approve the grant opportunity and then we would have to fold it into the budget. Okay, and then there is for maintenance and conservation, Councilmember Naplin, incorporate all concepts from existing policies on maintenance of artworks. Are there items, Councilmember Naplin, that you think we missed?
Remember what it was that stood out about what they have in the maintenance? Oh. I think what it was is that when an artwork was completed by an artist, that they would provide a maintenance plan to explain how their artwork needs to be maintained, so we would have that, if that makes sense. I think that's what was Yeah, so in the old plan, it said the artist shall provide a maintenance plan that includes a list of materials, diagrams, names of fabricators. And then, yeah, there was just, it's really just mostly that section that just had the expectation from the artist to potentially have that, but if that's not something other people are interested in, it just was something that was different that I noticed.
Councilmember Supple, and then.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Yes, it's in the, it doesn't have the level of detail that you're,
Oh, maybe that's why. I did this a really long time ago, so it's hard to remember exactly.
but it does say they need to provide a maintenance plan and schedule.
Councilmember Mercer.
And this is really jumping back to 11, which we skipped over because we talked about it previously about the tracking. We were talking sort of during break, a better word, like just for if you're taking this cataloging versus tracking.
Cataloging, yeah, that's a better word, okay. Okay. So do we want to make that second paragraph more robust?
I think what it might have been is not just as much the maintenance, but that they would have the specifications and drawings in case later you want to go back and you're like, what is this? How? I think that was something that they wanted. That might have been what I was seeing.
We can add specifications and or drawings as applicable and
Yeah.
schedule.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interior. To the best of the artist's ability.
Right.
Yeah.
Not picking on art.
Okay. All right. And then I think we have one more. Yep. Which is on section 3. Incorporate D as outlined in the existing policy. We're not gonna do the donated. So Councilmember Napoli, what for the deassessation, what part?
It looked like I mean, like I said, this was a long time ago that I did this work, where I was comparing the existing policy with this one, but I think it was, how art is to be considered to be decommissioned. There was a little comment about, reviewing, having a review, and then, yeah, it looks like donated art is not going to be an issue. Because we're not gonna do that, which is a good idea.
And
I think this is taking care of the 3.2, but just scanning between the two. One is like making every attempt, like if something is gonna be decommissioned, that you would like give that artist a heads up in case, I don't know, if they have it back, if we're just gonna dispose of it. But I think this 3.2 kind of hit on that. I mean, it talks about notifying them. It doesn't necessarily, yeah, I should talk about notifying them, but maybe that would spur a conversation of, yeah, anyways, that was the only other one I saw in there.
Yeah, I just think there was some feedback on social media, even just about some artwork that had been moved or different things, and that the artist didn't feel like they've been notified or understood why and things like that. So I think it's possible this all include that.
okay. All right, well, I will make the corrections and adjustments.
I have one question on K, content, once the artwork is in, section, is it how you say it, section? Yeah. Into the public art collection, well, it may not be a session on the basis of content alone. So just clarifying that, like, so once we have it and it's there, and we can't take it down based on like whatever the content of the piece is, or ever.
That was a legal ad, we can look at it again.
Okay.
So,
Just like an interesting.
yeah,
Where in there disappear.
yeah.
Clauses.
Yeah,
So it's a little bit of buyer beware.
yeah.
If we be thoughtful about what.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's just, we are saying that like, once it's there, we can't say we don't like it. We have to have a better reason than just content. I think.
So, yeah, for example, you wouldn't want a new mayor to come in and decide that they don't like any of the farming artwork and take it all down.
Right.
So that happens in other places. as it stands right now. We ever him?
Interesting thought based on that. I totally agree, but then I think the other side of what if, you know, in our history and you see where it hasn't really happened here, but like in other areas, you know, things that were historically put up like statues and now, you know, given changes and, you know, better understanding of what actually happened. So what if it was something like that? I mean, are there legal sidelines that would help with something that at the time seemed really amazing and then 20, 40 years later, whatever, we're like, wow, that was horribly offensive. Do you know what I mean? So is there kind of, or is that just a straight, like, nope, you can never do it? And I think I heard something about wear and tear and I get that, but,
I mean, so there are other things like security. So for some of the cities that have decommissioned art, you know, statues that have been taken down are no longer safe to be in the environment. You know, either due to threat or vandalism or kind of psychological
Yeah.
safety.
okay.
So, but just because the next administration doesn't like it,
Yeah.
that's what this is protecting.
No, the point on safety, totally. I see where that would be a way to address offensive things that we don't realize now, but yeah, all right, thank you.
Director Love, or Councilmember Love, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I was just like, I really just looking for clarity, makes sense.
So I will, what the process will be is I'm gonna clean this up. I'm gonna send it to City Attorney Kenny for one final review. I'll put it on consent. When you all see what's there, you can all decide if you want to keep it on consent or remove it, but that's where it will be on the 11th.
Excellent, thank you. And moving on to new business, we have Agenda Bill 23-73. Duvall Village Lot 1, Commercial Development Extension Request for discussion and or decision. Director Thomas.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Hopefully I won't drop off this time. My apologies for that. I'm working a couple of weeks remote from Texas. This evening, we are looking at Agenda Bill 2373. This is an additional 1-year extension for the requirement of that property to develop out. I am hoping, there it goes. I didn't even have to ask. Thank you, John. So on the upper left-hand corner, you can see a rendition from the application that was submitted in July, and that is looking south from 143rd. And on the right-hand side, you can see the vacant property and what it looks like today. Next slide. I wanted to give just a little bit of a project summary because we've have new council members on occasion, and this project spans quite a few years and even a couple of decades. So going back to 2014, we entered into an MOU that was between 3 parties, Westcott, DFA, and the city of Duvall. A development agreement was approved in 2015, and that is a 10-year vested document. So it actually expires next year. That's how long it's been already. They did receive preliminary plat in 2015 and final plat in 2019. In 2020, we granted permit extensions to Duvall Foundation for the Arts. Home construction began on this project in 21 and ended in 2023. So it took about 2 years for them to complete the 99 units out there. Parcel C1 was sold by Westcott to JSGP Ventures a couple of years ago, and they've requested 2 extensions to date, and they have actively been working on pre-applications. And in July, they submitted for a land use entitlement and have requested 1 additional year extension to begin construction of their improvements. We've worked collaboratively. We've already gone through 1 review. I would expect that they'll go to hearing late winter and possibly start construction this next summer. That's their plan, and that's our plan, is to help them get there. The requirement, though, for this lot is to complete construction by 2029. That is within the development agreement. So it gives them a little bit of time to build it out over a couple of years. Next slide. So this evening, we're here to take any sort of council discussion or direction. You can also make a final decision this evening, and I've provided an example, a sample motion if you need it. I don't have any more slides, and so I am ready to take any sort of questions from the city council at this time.
Councilmember Mercer.
So, I'm obviously familiar with this project from my time on the planning commission and the prior deferrals. I guess the one question I had for you, Director Thomas, in the attached letter, sort of requesting the deferral, they indicate that they expect to submit the permits within 90 days, with construction starting in early 2024. And I think you indicated probably most likely summer, next summer. I was just curious in terms of, is that a hard submittal date? I know there's lots of things that could change. I know one of the concerns with the planning commission is sort of the rolling set of deferrals and holding them to some accountability. I was just curious if there was any discussion at that time in terms of putting any conditions like within 120 days, you know, we build a little wiggle room in terms of submission, just so that there's some incremental progress. I'm not adverse to the extension per se, but obviously just the 1 year deferral without any other conditions means that technically they wouldn't need to start the process until a year from now.
So they have already submitted. So they've actually met one of the requirements of the letter that they submitted. So they have submitted for land use entitlement permits. And so we have to go through the hearing process, and that'll probably be in January. At that time, they can concurrently work on their building permits, and building permits can take 6 to 8 weeks to complete, and the construction review if things go well. So they could be under construction in the spring, but I think it's likely that it'll be this summer. So we would roll this extension over essentially from a year, a full year to July.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification that they've already, moved forward to doing some of that submission in terms of moving the project forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Nathan.
Yeah, I think that we gave, the impression that we would approve something like this if we saw things moving forward. And so I think that this is what, is the right thing to do, is to approve this. I do have one question, just looking at the design and trying to figure out, one of the reasons this project was so important was for economic development and the idea of having, a main street that was vibrant and, walkable. And it looks like the entryways are all facing away from Main Street, like there might not be any access to any of these, commercial properties from Main Street. Is that something that is finalized in the expectation of the project?
So I will answer that question. John, can you go back to the second slide, please? So, yeah, so there will be access off of Main Street down through a patio and down, and we are working with them to, if you see on that second photo, down on the left-hand side where the red is, there will be access to buildings, but you have to walk a little bit. The site is highly constrained by, by slope. And so we're trying to work with that. The one side that we're really struggling with is really this, the north side where you see that gray illustration, second on the right top. And so we just finished our first round review. And so they have really done a pretty good job snugging those buildings up to the main street. And then you'll see on that lower illustration where they're going to have access to the site from both the front and the back.
Okay, thank you, that helps.
Okay, thank you.
Is council ready to move forward on this tonight? We have the entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve Agenda Bill 23-73, approving the 1 year commercial deferment request for Duvall Village Parcel C1.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. Moving on to our final agenda item tonight, agenda bill 23-74, new proposed ordinance on mobile food units. Director Thomas.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Troy. I'm a senior planner here with the City of Duvall. And tonight we bring before you Agenda Bill 2374, which is a new interim ordinance, but at the same time, it's not new. All the regulations are the same. Let me adjust my screen here real quick for you. Hope I don't black out. Okay, here we go. Okay. Perfect. So our current interim ordinance expires on October 19th, just a couple days away. During the past 6 months, we did have one application approved. That was for the location of the Duvall Market there at the corner of Main and Virginia. The success rate, I guess we would say, it's not quite what we expected. We did have road construction on the Woodinville Duvall Road. So we did have a decrease in traffic there. So it wasn't quite the opportune location for the operation of the food truck like we hoped. But the good news is we do have another mobile food unit application in and under review for that location. So we're excited about that. What we'd normally do is ask council to extend the interim ordinance another 6 months. However, as I mentioned in our memo, we accidentally missed the deadline for advertising the public hearing for the extension of the interim ordinance. And so how we kind of get around that, as well as maintain compliance with state regulations, is to just adopt a new interim ordinance. And then we can hold a public hearing down the road, same way we did it the first time. But it does have to be adopted as a new interim ordinance as opposed to an extension. So the public hearing that we have for that is set for December 5th. And this, again, hopefully will give us more time to evaluate the interim ordinance and how it operates and functions. And hopefully during that time too, we can see another application in for another location here in town. So again, just to highlight some hypothetical locations of where food trucks could operate. Again, this is not exclusive or limited. It's just a high level evaluation. There are a number of locations up and down Main Street where one could function. So we're hoping that another location picks up during that time. So tonight, we're asking you to have a discussion if there are any questions and to make a final decision. We do have a recommended motion in your packet on the agenda bill. And that's all I have for that. If there's any questions.
Councilmember Schaefer.
So 6 months barely gets us into spring. I'm wondering if we can do this temporary ordinance longer than 6 months.
Yes.
I'm afraid we're going to be back here doing this again, and whatever that comes to April or whenever it is, possible to do it for a full year.
Yeah, so at the end of the 6 month period, we do have an opportunity to do an extension, a 6 month extension on that interim ordinance. So there is, the chance for us to do a full year. The problem is we're just kind of limited on, under state statute with interim ordinances. And so essentially we'd just be limited to the 6 months plus a 6 month extension.
Also, so Troy, there is a limitation under the state regulations, is that right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was actually my question. I just didn't ask it very well. Then okay, good. And the extension would also require a public hearing or not?
It would, correct. We'd have to hold another public hearing for the extension.
Okay. Okay, no, thank you. So with that, I move to approve, what was this? Agenda bill.
Next, 2374.
2373.
Oh, okay, 2374, so you do propose ordinance for mobile food units.
Second?
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes, and with that, unless there are objections, we are adjourned. 8 p.m. Thank you all. Yes, I got it. Yeah.
It's more like, there's the budget.